For northwest England and North Wales, some sunny spells here, quite breezy at times in western Scotland with a few showers, but elsewhere we should see some sunny spells. Staying on the chilly side, however, things may well turn pretty wet and windy at the end of the week.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's just 2 weeks left to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far. £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Amazing, just the best feeling ever.
I'm in shock. That is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
An absolute monster. It took Chloe and Sean Ing 90 minutes to reel in this gigantic 8-foot-long monster fish from Chigborough Fisheries in Essex. And upon weighing this enormous marine beast, it was found to have been 7 pounds heavier than the existing British record, a 143-pound catfish caught also in Essex. But as I understand it, you actually went for a Chinese meal when fate struck. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. So I was fishing an area of Chigborough where you have to fish at a fair distance. So I cast my rods out and then we ordered a Chinese. And yeah, so I got the bite at about 10 to 8 at night. And then about 20 minutes into it, my phone started ringing, the Chinese guys at the gate with my delivery. So I had to send a couple of guys off to go and get it. And then, yeah, the fight, obviously, you can't just stop the fight to go and get your Chinese. So, yeah, the fight went on, yeah, for about an hour and a half in total. There's no net in the world that's big enough for this fish. So we had to send out, first of all, I sent out a mate, Alex. He went out there to go and basically use what we call a sling. So that's a safe apparatus that we use to take the fish out of the water. He then went to and he turned around and he was like, we're going to need another sling. So then we sent out another friend with a sling, and these slings are 4 foot long each. So then we had the catfish wrapped up in 2 slings, and it was still slightly longer than that. And then we got to a point where we was like, now we've got to try and get it out of the water to photo, to weigh it, because obviously we knew then that it was possibly going to be a UK record.
GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Tuesday, the 21st of January. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
The Prime Minister launches an inquiry into the clear and repeated failures that led to the Southport stabbings, adding the definition of terrorism may now be changed to reflect attacks like Axel Rudakabana. We'll hear live from the Home Secretary.
Yes, and this as the Prime Minister reveals he knew about the Southport attackers' terror links in the wake of the attack, but claims he could not reveal these details to the public for fear he could prejudice a trial.
Across the pond, America's golden age has begun, according to President Trump at least, who signed a raft of executive orders, including exiting the World Health Organization, pardoning the January the 6th rioters, declaring an emergency on the southern border, and recognizing only 2 genders. We'll have the latest.
We will indeed. And elsewhere, MPs are currently questioning Alexis Jay on her 2022 report into child sexual abuse. We'll bring you that, as well as a shocking GB News exclusive with our national reporter, Charlie Peters. Well, well, well. Tom, what did you make of that press conference with Keir Starmer?
I think it was a press conference of two halves. You had the statement, which actually I thought was very assured from the Prime Minister. I think it was very cleverly written. Clearly, a lot of thought had gone into that in terms of how to assuage concerns of communities across the country and to try and deal head-on with the issue that people had been raising. But then you got to the question and answers.
Fell apart a bit then, didn't it?
And I think the Prime Minister failed to answer some very key questions about the timeline of what went on, about who knew what and when, and what exactly would have prejudiced a trial had it been released, and what wouldn't. And that's a game of two halves.
Yes. Why were we not allowed to know anything about the perpetrator in the run-up to the arrest? There would have been a period of time then where he hadn't been arrested, so no contempt of court would be an issue.
No charge.
So why weren't we told then? You know, previously, when there have been incidents, they've been labelled terror attacks straight away, or we've been told a little about the perpetrator and what the motivation might have been. And then also, why were we told randomly in October about these two terror-related charges, the Al-Qaeda manual and also the ricin? Why were we told that by the police suddenly in October? And why did Keir Starmer not mention that previously?
We know that the ricin and the terror manual were found literally in the hours, the couple of days after the attack itself. We're talking 24, 48 hours. Why then was it months before that was released? And let's not forget, everyone except those two crucial bits of information did not prejudice the trial because they were published before the trial was due to begin. The Prime Minister was asked that question directly in the questions. He had no answer.
Yeah, and he talks all the time about misinformation and the dangers of it. So why then leave it up to online speculation over the identity of this perpetrator and the potential motivation? Let us know your thoughts, gbnews.com/USA. What did you make of what the Prime Minister had to say there after your headlines with Sam?
Very good afternoon to you. Just after midday, the top story this hour, while the Prime Minister says Britain is facing a new terror threat, warning of what he described as extreme violence from loners and misfits after the Southport murders. Axel Rudikabana pleaded guilty to killing 3 young girls at a dance class in July, despite repeated referrals to authorities and the counter-terror scheme. An inquiry has now been launched to uncover how warning signs were missed, with Sir Keir Starmer calling the failures glaringly obvious. In a speech this morning, he also warned of a growing danger fuelled by online extremism, saying laws must change to confront this new and disturbing threat.
Terrorism has changed. In the past, the predominant threat was highly organised groups with clear political intent, groups like Al-Qaeda. That threat, of course, remains. But now, alongside that, we also see acts of extreme violence perpetrated by loners, misfits, young men in their bedroom, accessing all manner of material online, desperate for notoriety.
President Donald Trump has begun his first full day back in the White House after an extravagant inauguration in Washington that lasted into the early hours.
And you're witnessing the dawn of the golden age of America. That's what it's going to be. We're bringing it back. We're going to bring it back fast.
He wasted no time signing orders to pull the US out of the World Health Organization and declared a national emergency at the border. He's also pardoned nearly 1,600 people tied to the January the 6th Capitol riots, with some expected to walk free later today. In his speech, Trump promised to be a peacemaker and a unifier, declaring the golden age of America begins right now. Here at home, wage growth has surged to 5.6%. That is the fastest pace in months, but unemployment is now creeping up, standing at 4.4%. December saw 47,000 fewer people on payrolls, marking the biggest drop since 2020, as businesses cut costs ahead of looming tax hikes. Economists warn the jobs market could still cool further, with pay growth expected to slow and unemployment likely to rise. The figures pile pressure on Chancellor Rachel Reeves, with growing speculation also pointing to a possible Bank of England rate cut next month. At the High Court, Prince Harry's legal battle with the publisher of The Sun has been delayed a second time. The Duke of Sussex and Labour's Lord Tom Watson are suing News Group newspapers over allegations of unlawful information gathering, which the publisher denies. The publisher also denies that wrongdoing, but the High Court case follows 39 settlements over the past 18 years. The trial, initially set to begin this morning, has been postponed until 2 p.m. after both sides requested more time. Plans to expand Heathrow Airport could face turbulence, with environmental groups warning it would be catastrophic for the climate. Chancellor Rachel Reeves is reportedly set to back the third runway in a speech next week, along with expansion at Gatwick and at Luton airports. Critics, though, say more flights would worsen emissions, air pollution and noise, while climate charity Possible argues it's a misstep for a government claiming to lead on climate. Heathrow's third runway was approved in 2018, but remains stalled by legal battles and the pandemic, while Gatwick and Luton's plans are already in the fast lane. And get ready for a wild weather weekend. Storm Eowyn is on the way, and it's set to bring severe gales to the UK from Friday onwards. The Met Office has issued yellow wind warnings for northern and western Scotland and Northern Ireland, with gusts of up to 80 miles an hour possible. Expect power cuts too, travel chaos and localised damage in some areas as the storm rolls in, accompanied by heavy rain and hill snow. It's all thanks to a clash between freezing Arctic air and warmer Atlantic conditions, shaking up the recent calm but chilly weather. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with you in around half an hour. Now, though, it's over to Tom and Emily.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 12. Now, the Prime Minister has said today that the Southport killings must be a line in the sand for Britain, and there must be fundamental change in how the country protects her children.
Yes, so Keir Starmer, he addressed the nation this morning. He said the UK now faces a new terrorism threat following the guilty plea of Axel Radicalization.
It's a difficult word to say.
He also said, I thought I'd nailed it by now. Anyway, He also said he knew about the Southport attackers' terror links in the wake of the attack, but claims he could not reveal these details to the public for fear he could prejudice a trial.
Well, we're expecting a common statement from the Home Secretary in the next 60 minutes or so, and also a statement from the Deputy Prime Minister on the definition of terrorism. So we're going to keep an eye on the Commons for you. But in the meantime, our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, is here. And Mark, what an extraordinary 24 hours it's been.
Yes, indeed. Taken completely by surprise, of course, with the guilty pleas that came out yesterday to those 16 charges that Axel Radicalization faced, saving the families at least the ordeal of having to sit through a trial. But now, of course, with this new information coming out that we've finally been able to report about the background of these individuals, it's clear there were very worrying aspects of this man's violent past and personality that went to multiple agencies, not just the Prevent Counter-Extremism programme, but to the police, to the courts, to the youth justice system, to the health service, social services. None of these agencies acted on the information that was referred to them in any meaningful way. Very significant failures that the Prime Minister says he hopes a public inquiry will get to the bottom of, and it will be a line in the sand. But sadly, I have to say we've heard that kind of rhetoric from many other Prime Ministers over the years when horrific events have unfolded for us only to find out in the fullness of time that individuals were known to the authorities, opportunities were missed to act and try and divert people away from that kind of violent extremism. And I suspect that even after this line in the sand that Sir Keir Starmer talks about there will be others in the future.
Now, if we cast our minds back to the aftermath of this horrific attack, there was huge amounts of online speculation over the identity, whether this was a terror-related attack, what the motivation could possibly be. Keir Starmer took to the stage there and said very clearly that the reason why he did not say anything that he knew to the public about the perpetrator, the suspect at the time, was that it could prejudice a trial. Now, hearing from others, including Jonathan Hall, Casey, he says that actually there's a lot you can say without prejudicing a trial. So I suppose the public don't know exactly what to believe here.
Well, indeed. And I think the issue around whether a trial can be prejudiced or not is being overplayed here. The fact is, been to many, many trials over the years, judges tell the jury very clearly to ignore all that has been said previously, to judge the case on the evidence before them. And the information that would have been made available to the public and indeed the press at the time would have been information that would have been used by the prosecution in the case anyway. It would have been relied on bad character evidence, the evidence of his propensity towards violence, his desire to carry out a school massacre, would have been used as part of the case to strengthen the case in a courtroom. So would it have been prejudice? Very probably not, but this is what they tell us now, and I think in telling us this now, it just compounds the suspicions that many people have that information was sat on because it was too volatile in the country at that time. They feared the potential for more disorder if that kind of information came out.
Well, of course, the Prime Minister was asked these sorts of questions at the press conference. Shall we have a listen to what Sir Keir Starmer said about the effects of potentially prejudicing a trial?
Are not just my choices, though it is a choice I would make, it is also the law of the land. That is why I couldn't disclose the details. It's why others couldn't disclose the details. It's why all of you as journalists couldn't disclose the details, because the same laws applied to you just as they applied to me. And it's really important that we make that clear. But the purpose of the rule is to protect the justice that the families and the victims are entitled to.
Well, that's what the Prime Minister had to say. What did you make of it?
Well, I quite frankly, find it difficult to buy into that particular argument. As I say, I think there's very little to no chance of the jury being prejudiced. And I know that the police in this case had more. In fact, the Chief Constable said so in a statement yesterday. More facts that they wanted to get out there to confirm or to, debunk some of the wilder speculation that was going about social media. But they were being advised at every step of the way by the Crown Prosecution Service that they could prejudice potentially any ongoing trial or future trial. And so they had to follow that advice. And it's not just Merseyside Police. I hear this from police forces across the country about their concerns that information that they would want to put into the public realm, to be full and frank, they are increasingly now being told by prosecutors that they can't do this for risk of contempt of court, of prejudicing any trial, leading to the collapse of that trial. And as I say, I just don't think that that actually has any basis in the reality of what would follow in a court case where these facts would be used in that particular trial anyway.
I wonder, and perhaps this is a silly question, but I wonder, Keir Starmer was very quick to call people far-right who were involved in the riots, now despicable behaviour in some of those events of disorder. I mean, could not labelling people far-right potentially prejudice the trials that were ongoing at the time? I mean, maybe that's a ridiculous question, but it's just something that I can't stop thinking.
Yeah, I mean, very few of them went to trial as such, and most people sort of pleaded or it was considered by the likes of a magistrate. But you're right, intervening and branding people who were clearly then being arrested at that time as far-right thugs and extremists has the potential to prejudge what these individuals were doing out on the street. On that issue, actually, of his claims about the far right, our political editor, Christopher Hope, asked him this question. Look, in light of what we know now, was it right actually to brand these people as he did at the time as far right. I was at the news conference at Downing Street when he spoke of cohorts of far-right individuals getting on trains and going up to these towns to orchestrate this violence, then subsequently monitored many of these court cases as they came to fruition. Pretty much all of the cases involved individuals who were from the local area where the violence and disorder was taking place. There are no instances that I've seen in any of the court cases of individuals who travelled from far outside their area to go to orchestrate the violence. So where that information was coming for Keir Starmer to stand up and say that, you know, the intelligence was that far-right individuals were boarding trains, because he very specifically said that they were looking perhaps to tighten legislation to ensure that that kind of, you know, travelling to carry out disorder could not happen. But as I say, you know, there's no evidence of it in the subsequent
I remember when
trials.
we were told that there were going to be these uprisings of far-right riots, including in areas of London where you would not expect something like that to take place, and then it didn't materialise in the end. A very odd period of time. Mark White, thank you very much indeed, our Home and Security Editor. We'll speak to you again later, I hope.
Now, we should say, of course, we're looking forward to the Home Secretary's statement in the House of Commons covering this issue and many others. That's due to take place, well, within the next hour.
OK, well, joining us now is Special Investigations Editor at the Daily Mail, Sue Reid. Sue, thank you very much indeed. You will have been watching that press conference with Keir Starmer, I'm sure. What did you make of it?
I actually think that this idea that there are young men in bedrooms all over Britain doing this alone is complete, you know, fabrication. And I'm sorry, Prime Minister, nobody does these crimes alone. They are always linked through the internet. They are not alone. You're not alone with the internet and a laptop in your bedroom. You are talking to similarly minded people, and they may or may not stir you into action, but that is the fact. And it happened in the case of the concert terrible attack 7 years ago in Manchester, when 22 people, including children, were killed by, we were told, a lone. First of all, we were told it was a lone terrorist. In fact, he turned out to have al-Qaeda links. He was learning his stuff on the internet. And of course, in Southport, we know now that there was an al-Qaeda manual involved. These young men are not alone.
Although there does seem to be a distinction between the Manchester Arena bombing and the Southport stabbings, in that one was very clearly religiously sort of determined. Yeah. This guy was a fanatic Islamist terrorist. With Axel Ridicabana, it's less clear if this guy was an Islamist or if this was just a deranged psychopath obsessed with violence who had been connected to the system in so many different times, reported due to his obsession and love for death and killing, who happened to stumble upon al-Qaeda materials as the best way to carry out his sick desires.
But there is another clue here, and I'm not speculating on whether he was an Islamist or not, or whether he's now become one, by the way. But a few days after the Southport bombing, the Southport killings, in Austria, they cancelled a Taylor Swift concert because, again, the perpetrator, who's now been charged, was reading al-Qaeda material online, and there is absolutely a link between the hatred of little girls attending concerts, watching other young women dance and sing. And there is a hatred of this within the extreme Islamic community. They do not like seeing girls and women doing this.
Yeah,
so there is a link.
Yeah, and the motivation, I desperately hope that we find out exactly what was behind it. The way he sought out this particular dance class, you say potentially there could be a Islamist ideology that attacks, you know, goes after girls especially.
Yeah, I mean, there is a link, whatever his religious leanings or passions were, the fact is that Taylor Swift is a huge clue, I mean, a very sad clue. And look at the security we put in London regarding Taylor Swift concert soon after that. I mean, it was enormous, wasn't it? And that was for a reason.
Yes, I think it's very clear that there is a section of radical Islamism that just detests. I mean, we know that it's illegal for women to dance in Iran. We know the restrictions that particularly, Salafist Islamism places on people. But of course, there are lots of countries that are much more liberally run Islamic societies. I mean, Jordan is a great example where there is a huge amount of liberalism and a very different interpretation of what the religion Islam is about.
Indeed. But this Taylor Swift dance class was specifically targeted. I mean, that has been said. And I would also just like to say something about the court case. I mean, I think it's an incredibly sad thing, and I think there will be deepening anger about this, that not only were the families not allowed to really say anything meaningful beforehand, because of the forthcoming court case. Mark White's just been explaining that. But then to find out of the blue that this guy pleads guilty, I mean, on that morning, actually in the courtroom, when he'd never spoken before, I think really it's not a cover-up. This has been a stitch-up. And I don't like what I see and hear, and I come from the Southport area. I've got nieces of the same age and some with the same names. And I promise you, this has destroyed Southport, where I used to go for journalist training. I know the town, and the people are fundamentally decent Lancastrians, I promise you.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine the impact on the town itself and just the community and parents and other children. Sue, I'm really sorry, but we're going to have to leave it there because we've come to the end. But Sue Reed, thank you very much indeed for your time, Special Investigations Editor at the Daily Mail. Now, do not go anywhere. Do not move an inch. We're going to be outside Downing Street next.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Tell us about the backlash situation, first of all.
Yeah, so the Duke and Duchess of Sussex visited a local food distribution centre, handing out food parcels to those who had been displaced or emergency service workers as well. And they happened to be captured by a local news crew. I think it was a Fox News crew. It's part of World Central Kitchen. That's a charity that they have supported for a number of years now, who've been doing this food distribution things. Whether or not it was a photo op, it's really unclear. I don't think we're ever going to get the answer to that. They didn't look like they were made up to look glam for the television. It looked genuine, but of course we know Meghan is an actress as well. So I'll let you make up your own mind on that one. But then we found out very late last night that the Duchess has asked Netflix to postpone her new lifestyle programme, and the Duchess has released a statement actually, and she says, "I'm thankful to my partners at Netflix for supporting me and delaying the launch as we focus on the needs of those impacted by the wildfires in my home state of California." She thinks it would be inappropriate to launch a glossy programme where she's in a $5 million mansion cooking food. It's an 8-part series, and hopefully by that time these fires will be well and truly extinguished.
Well, they're also getting criticism in the US as well from Jason Bateman's sister, that's the actor, saying that, talking about that photo opportunity that people are calling it, saying that Meghan Markle and Harry are no better than ambulance chasers and they're disaster tourists.
It is difficult, isn't it, for Meghan and Harry trying to find their place in the world. Are they media, entertainment personalities, celebrities, and doing Netflix and all the rest of it? Or are they going to be humanitarian workers like perhaps being members of the royal family would be? And I think at the moment they're kind of straddling those two different worlds, aren't they?
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 26 minutes past 12. We're going to go straight to Downing Street, where our political editor, Christopher Hope, is for us. And, Christopher, you've not only been at that press conference with the Prime Minister this morning, but also just now with his spokesman. Run us through. What is happening today?
Hi, Tom. Yeah, the big news is coming up shortly in the House of Commons. We'll get more detail from the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, on this public inquiry into those Southport killings. There's already a review going on into Prevent. They're looking, according to the government spokesman just now, at when people are referred to Prevent, why it might be that the Southport killer was referred, then not dealt with on 3 separate occasions in 2019 and 2021. They're looking at the definition of terrorism, so it includes lone wolves, young men, in some cases children, being radicalised in the privacy of their own bedrooms, and also this wider inquiry into the killings, and why did all these different authorities know about this individual but do nothing to act on it. So we've heard that from the Prime Minister just now, the spokesman just now. Earlier, over breakfast, I was here back in Downing Street, asking the PM a different question, whether he regretted blaming the far right for those protests last summer. Not the rioting, but the protests. Was that all down to the far right? And this is what the Prime Minister had to say to me.
Responsibility for the violence lies with them that perpetrated it. I was in Southport the day after these terrible murders. I was acknowledging and thanking the frontline police officers and ambulance who had been at the scene. You can imagine what they had been through. They were back at work the next day. They were saying it was just their job. I could see in their eyes the impact it had had on them, what they had to deal with, what they had to see, how they endured that. As I arrived back in London, those same officers were putting their riot gear on and having bricks thrown at them. Those same officers. I don't think anybody can justify that, nor should they attempt to do so.
The PM there not answering the question. It wasn't about rioting so much as about the protest last summer from people who weren't rioting, simply concerned about the issues of immigration we talk about so much on GB News to our viewers and listeners. And also, just while I've got you, Tom, in the lobby meeting, the PM spokesman was asked about all the blizzard of executive orders signed last night by Donald Trump, for example, on leaving the WHO, the World Health Organization, and also withdrawing from the climate change agreement. The PM spokesman had no comment on those moves by the US President Donald Trump. The number 10 says he was elected on a mandate and he's delivering that mandate, and there's no comment from the UK on what he's doing.
Yes, Chris, there's quite a difference, isn't there? You've got Donald Trump in the United States getting rid of the Paris Climate Accord, going back on net zero commitments. Meanwhile, in Davos, you've got the meeting of the global elite, including Rachel Reeves at the moment, I believe, and they're all talking about climate safeguarding.
That's right, there's different approaches here. I mean, number 10's approach is probably the right one. They can't really resile, Emily, from net zero or the ideas they have about the environment, or the EV, the electric vehicle mandate, also dropped last night but by Donald Trump. So I think, yeah, they've got to say that's what Americans voted for. He's doing it. I think it's difficult, though, why it's puzzling why this government won't comment and risk being critical. It might be because it's quite a thin-skinned president. You can't really criticise him, but the government for now is sticking to what it believes in, which is following those the net zero, the EV, the electrical vehicle mandate, and of course membership of the WHO. But this is just the beginning, Emily and Tom, of what could be a very interesting time in international politics.
Yes, perhaps it's a case of if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all.
Indeed.
Perhaps that's what the spokesperson is thinking.
Well, Chopper, thanks so much for joining us. And indeed, you've set us off wonderfully for our next segment because there's much more coming up. A golden age of America has begun. That's according to President Trump. He's signed off this raft, dozens of executive orders. We're taking a closer look at what those executive orders are after your headlines.
Very good afternoon to you from the newsroom 12:31. Keir Starmer says the state's failure to prevent Axel Ruder-Cabana's Southport murders leaps off the page and must mark a line in the sand. The 18-year-old admitted killing 3 girls at a dance class, 10 attempted murders and possessing an al-Qaeda training manual. A public inquiry has now been launched after it emerged he was expelled from school, attacked a pupil with a hockey stick and was repeatedly visited by police. In a statement this morning, the Prime Minister warned terrorism has changed, vowing to confront difficult questions without cultural or institutional blind spots.
Terrorism has changed. In the past, the predominant threat was highly organised groups with clear political intent, groups like al-Qaeda. That threat, of course, remains. But now, alongside that, we also see acts of extreme violence perpetrated by loners, misfits, young men in their bedroom, accessing all manner of material online, desperate for notoriety.
Well, in other news this afternoon, a 15-year-old boy from Southampton has been charged today with terror offences linked to extreme Islamist ideology. He's facing 3 counts of possessing documents likely to assist in preparing an act of terrorism and 3 counts of encouraging terrorism. The teenager has been released on bail and is due to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court later this month. Counter-Terrorism Police South East are leading that investigation. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have officially taken office as president and vice president with an extravagant inauguration in Washington that lasted into the early hours.
And you're witnessing the dawn of the golden age of America. That's what it's going to be. We're bringing it back. We're going to bring it back fast. We're going to bring it back.
Wasting no time, Trump has signed orders to pull the US out of the World Health Organization and declared a national emergency at the southern border. He's also pardoned nearly 1,600 people tied to the January 6th Capitol riots, with some expected to walk free later today. In his speech, Trump promised to be a peacemaker and a unifier, declaring the golden age of America begins right now. But the spotlight was also turned to Elon Musk, who came under fire after appearing to make a Nazi salute at a post-inauguration event. Prince Harry's legal battle with the publisher of The Sun has been delayed for a second time at the High Court today. The Duke of Sussex and Labour's Lord Tom Watson are suing News Group newspapers over allegations of unlawful information gathering, which the publisher denies. They also say that 39 settlements have been made over the past 18 years, but this trial, initially set to begin this morning, has been postponed until 2 p.m. after both sides requested more time. It's expected to last 6 to 8 weeks. And just before we take a quick break, a piece of breaking news we've been keeping across in Turkey this afternoon, where a hotel fire has taken place. We're just hearing that the death toll there has now risen, initially from 10 to now 66 in that ski resort where the hotel fire broke out. We're also hearing that 51 people are at this stage believed to be wounded or injured following that blaze. It took place at the Grand Kartal Hotel, that is around 186 miles east of Istanbul. So we'll keep an eye on the figures coming to us out of Turkey. But as I say, just the latest line is that the death toll from that fire has now risen to 66 at that ski resort fire. Well, those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with you in half an hour. Tom and Emily back after this break.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Rather cloudy once again for many of us, with rain in places but not everywhere. It will be brightest in the north, albeit with a mix of sunny spells and showers for Scotland and Northern Ireland, with low pressure to the northwest. This low to the southwest will produce an awful lot of cloud across England and Wales, and a slow-moving front which has effectively stalled through North Wales and Northern England. That continues to bring outbreaks of light rain and drizzle. In the south, there will be a few cloud breaks, but on the whole, it's a cloudy day and temperatures will reach 5 to 7 Celsius. Further north, with any brighter spells, 8 Celsius possible. Quite a few showers coming into the west of Scotland. Now into Tuesday afternoon, we're going to see further showers arriving into northern and western Scotland, but the best of any sunshine and clear spells as we go into the evening will be across eastern and southern Scotland, as well as parts of Northern Ireland. Into northern England, and we've got a lot of cloud and outbreaks of rain. Likewise for north and west Wales. 1 or 2 showers for Devon and Cornwall, and a lot of cloud there for southern areas. Low cloud, some mist patches forming overnight in places as well. And we'll see the odd fog patch for Scotland and Northern Ireland, where we do have lengthy clear spells. As the night goes on, the rain across northern England and Wales sinks into the Midlands. We'll also see some rain breaking out for southern counties of England. 3 or 4 Celsius in the south, a touch of frost further north where we've got any prolonged clear spells, and a few fog patches first thing. Now Wednesday morning starts off dreary across the Midlands, the south and southeast of England. The cloud and rain slowly peters out and moves southeastwards. Brighter skies follow for the north and west, albeit with a few showers. Highs of 5 to 7 Celsius.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In the Highland, the A9 is closed in both directions north of Invergordon after an accident. In Aberdeenshire, the A96 is closed westbound from the Kinella roundabout to the Broomhill roundabout at Kintore after a vehicle caught fire. In Northumberland, the A69 is closed eastbound from Greenhead to Haltwhistle after an accident. On the M62 in West Yorkshire, 2 out of 3 lanes closed eastbound after an accident just before junction 25 at Brighouse, with queues back beyond junction 23 at Huddersfield. On the M6 in Warwickshire, the inside lanes closed northbound between junctions 4A and 5 off the M42 near Birmingham after an accident. It's taking 40 minutes in the queues. On the M40 in Buckinghamshire, 2 out of 3 lanes closed northbound just after junction 3 at Loudwater after an accident and spillage, with queues from junction 2 at Beaconsfield, and there are delays of up to 2.5 hours to Irish ferry sailings between Dover and Calais. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 38 minutes past midday and a golden age of America has begun. That's the message from President Donald Trump, sworn in yesterday as the 47th President of the United States.
Yes, almost straight away he was signing off on a raft of executive orders, and they included lots of very big things, including withdrawing the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement and declaring illegal immigration at the US-Mexico border a national emergency.
Well, he also pardoned about 1,500 supporters charged over the January the 6th riots at the US Capitol. But what does all of this mean for the United States and the wider world? Joining us now is Democrat strategist Joel Rubin. Joel, thanks so much for getting up early for us over there in the United States. Frankly, this is a much more active first time as president for the president now than it was in his first term.
Well, yeah, Tom and Emily, it's great to be with you. And I have to say, it's not really a new golden age, it's a new gilded age in America. And I think we saw that on full display yesterday with the billionaire plutocratic class of the United States sitting alongside Donald Trump. In fact, sitting ahead of his cabinet picks. And to your point, you're right. This is a much more effective day one, because if we recall 8 years ago, basically Donald Trump had thrown out his transition books and transition team. It was led by Governor Chris Christie at the time. And so he really didn't have a clear structured path. Well, now he did. He got a lot of his red meat points across yesterday in his executive orders. That's not governing, that's just political statements, and they're going to have an impact, and we can get into that. But it really was a red meat executive order day, a new gilded age in America, and the billionaires are very happy.
Oh, so you think this was executive orders for the billionaires? You know, are you worried that potentially some of these policies could enrich the average American?
Yeah, you know, I think that it was an inauguration for the billionaires. He left the American people out in the cold. It wasn't really cold yesterday. I actually was at President Obama's inauguration in 2012. It was colder than yesterday, but we saw, you know, the billionaires sitting in front of the cabinet picks. But I think this is a very important point that you point out. Of all these executive orders, what he didn't really get into was economic issues, or how to combat inflation, how to bring down the cost of eggs, how to make American lives easier.
Well, hang on. He talked about a national energy. Joel, he talked about a national energy emergency. Now, you probably know in this country, this is one of our big failures, that energy is just so expensive and it's making us poorer as a result. Well, Donald Trump there is saying, drill, baby, drill, bring down those energy costs. That will bring down inflation and potentially put more money in people's hands.
Well, it's curious considering the United States is the #1 oil exporter in the history of the planet, actually. And frankly, this is an executive order that is not focused on what Americans talked about, which was inflation, the cost of eggs, inflation, the rising prices, inflation. He said he would get rid of that on day one. Also, I didn't see an executive order about ending the war in Ukraine, as he said he would finish on day one either. So, you know, a lot of empty promises on the campaign trail. We shouldn't really be surprised. But he did, you know, release the January 6th prisoners, the people who attacked Capitol Police violently, and is now sending them out into the United States without accountability.
Now, there are, of course, dozens of executive orders. We don't have time to go through them all. Some of them, no doubt, will be challenged in the court. There is a lot of consternation over whether or not some of these orders fit within the powers of the president, and always some are appealed, some are upheld. But one that is particularly catching some headlines is this idea that TikTok will be returned to the American people. The ban that lasted a little under 24 hours. An extension now to the promise that the executive won't enforce any such ban. What's all that about?
Yeah, so, you know, in legislation, I worked on Capitol Hill for a number of years. There are always waivers, we call them, where the president can waive a law for a certain amount of time. And so banning TikTok was a bipartisan bill across both chambers of Capitol Hill, tremendous support, including from Mike Waltz, who's now the National Security Advisor. But the president, he waived this law for about 3 months, 75 days, I believe, to try to find a solution to prevent TikTok from going offline. So, you know, this is sort of already showing that he's not going to be really tough on China. He's going to try to find another way out of this and make sure that the tech moguls are happy. But we'll see, because this will expire and there's bipartisan support for banning TikTok. If he can find a suitable purchaser, great. But if not, it's got to go offline.
Well, I mean, Donald Trump did very much go viral on TikTok in the election campaign, didn't he? So he'd miss it very much.
National security doesn't matter.
He attributes some of his success with the younger voters to it, doesn't he? Joel Rubin, thank you very much indeed, Democrat strategist. Good to have you on the show. Do you have a little look at a little montage that you made?
Oh, I think we'll have to save that for the next hour. But it was interesting. I mean, he wasn't as fast out of the blocks in his first term as presidency, whether it was for his cabinet appointees. I mean, Marco Rubio has now been confirmed by the Senate as Secretary of State. Many more of these cabinet appointees will be confirmed much faster this time. It seems that there has actually been a lot more strategy and preparation for this term of presidency compared to 2016.
I didn't realise this one, that he's signed an order on the death penalty, directing the Attorney General to take all necessary and lawful action to ensure states have enough lethal injection drugs to carry out executions. That's nice, isn't it?
There's also one about federal architecture, making sure it's all neoclassical, which I quite enjoyed.
I approve of that. Yeah. I mean, with the monstrosities, I mean, some of the buildings that we've, you know, destroyed to make way for these hideous, what do you call it?
But brutalist.
1960s,
yeah,
50s,
no, awful.
brutalist nightmares.
But actually, some of the, I mean, Washington DC is such a fascinating place because you can walk down and you can think these buildings are hundreds of years old. And there's the Ronald Reagan Center for International Trade. And walking past it, you think, oh, this is an old building that's been repurposed. But no, it was only built in the last 20 years. And
You must be able to tell.
No, you can't. It looks like all the other buildings in DC, which are all built to look, neoclassical, but they're all built, relatively recently. I mean, it's a good style. We should do more of that in the UK.
Yeah, a nice little executive order on beautiful buildings. Anyway, if you're in search of some winter sun, here is the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Some winter sunshine likely for the next couple of days in Sardinia and also Sicily, but some showers in Cyprus and some pretty wet conditions across the Canaries and Madeira for the next couple of days. The same weather system bringing soggy skies to Portugal also, and some wet weather across southern parts of France, some snow over the Alps. Showers in Cyprus, they'll still be there on Thursday, but they should be easing by Friday, and the rain in the Canaries will be easing by Friday as well, and temperatures over 20 degrees here.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Do stay with us. There's plenty more coming. We're going to bring you a shocking exclusive report with Charlie Peters. It's on grooming gangs and you do not want to miss it. That next.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Look, if people want to do veganuary, that's all well and good, but it shouldn't be forced on people, should it? Or even strongly suggested by something like the NHS?
It's not being forced on anybody. People can choose in the Wirral or any other NH trust that gets involved whether they want to partake or not. What they're doing are promoting the benefits of a vegan diet. Now, you imagine you're the NHS trust. You've got one person dying every 3 minutes from heart disease. And vegans get much less high blood pressure, much less heart disease than do meat eaters. So surely, if your job is to promote health, then you should let people know these kind of stats. Vegans get less cancer. Red meat is a class 1 carcinogen, classed by the World Health Organization as processed meat definitely causes cancer of the bowel. So it's just letting people know what the health advantages are of reducing or taking meat completely out of your diet and becoming vegan. You get less diabetes type 2, which is a big problem in the UK, less deaths from stroke, and around 1/5 less of all cancers. Imagine it was drugs that had that kind of impact. People would be hailing it and going, wow, this is amazing.
To call it about diversity and inclusion, I just think that's a load of nonsense. This is a move away by public bodies from this compulsory veganism. Look, your speaker from Viva, which is a very hardline animal rights organisation, attempts to talk about the environment and other issues, but really this to them is about animal rights. They don't believe in a world where we should use animals. I completely disagree with the speaker. I respect her right to say that, of course, but I completely disagree. And that's why the NHS and public bodies just shouldn't be getting involved in things that are so controversial.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's now 10 to 1, and GB News can reveal that a grooming gang abuser is involved in attempting to convert a property into a children's care home in Leeds.
Well, you couldn't make it up, could you? Abid Yunus, who was jailed for 2.5 years in 2015 after being convicted of sexual activity with a child, 2.5 years, is the owner of a property being converted into a care home. Charlie Peters is here to tell us more. This is your exclusive story that you brought to us. I'm surprised at the length of that sentence, actually.
Well, I'm not.
Get onto the care.
I'm not surprised at it at all. It's incredibly common, unfortunately. Some may say, unfortunately. Of course, I'm a reporter. I have no opinion. But lots of people who have covered these sentences in the past have seen many similar lengths of sentencings for this sort of abuse. On Friday last week, for example, we had news breaking from Bradford Crown Court, where a rape gang of 8 men was sentenced to a total of 52 years. So many of those sentences, less than 5 years for the abuse of a child, men literally queuing up in a corridor to attack a child. So in this case, I know that Abid Yunus, who was convicted in 2015 in Leeds, was part of a 10-strong gang that targeted a 12-year-old girl. Now, he received a 2.5-year prison sentence for this. Some other members of that gang received sentences of up to 15 years, but no more than 15 years. I also believe that every single member of that gang has now been released from prison. And I do know that one of them was born in Pakistan, but as far as I can tell, none of them have been deported, all of them being of Pakistani descent. Now, the girl that they targeted endured the most horrendous abuse, and I think what a lot of people are concerned about is that what happens to these perpetrators after their release from prison? Do they go back into their communities? Well, in this form of child abuse, that is often the case. The lack of community punishment is a big problem. It seems to be that in this case, as we've now revealed, they can even go on and be involved in attempts to launch care homes for children. Abid Yunus.
Just on that point, on the no community punishment, you say there's no community punishment, i.e. they don't become pariahs in their community.
Precisely.
They're accepted straight back in as if nothing happened. Is that what you're saying?
Precisely, that's the case. They can often go back just to rejoin their families. They can often go back into the exact same line of work they're in before. Or they can launch companies such as Yunus Investments, the company that I looked into for this specific case, and work with other people to launch children's care homes. Now, as I understand it, this morning, that planning application has since been withdrawn after we broke this story. So there's been quite a rapid reaction to this. I imagine quite a lot of political pressure was put onto the council and its planning officers and indeed those involved in this application. And I expect more details to come out soon about how it got this far for us to reveal this situation.
It almost seems like there are some parallel societies existing within the United Kingdom with completely different moral guidelines, structures, family structures, almost clannish behaviour rather than the more individualistic society that that's grown to be so successful over hundreds of years in this country. I mean, that's some big questions to ask about actually how justice continues.
Yeah, big questions to ask that are part of those demands we've seen for a national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal, because there's never been any proper academic, scholarly, government-led research into clannishness and abuse gangs, how they operate, the motivations, the punishment or lack thereof by the communities. These are areas that should be quite fascinating, actually, for investigation. But unfortunately, it seems that people just don't want to look into it that much. Now, in this case, with Abid Yunus, that planning application has been withdrawn. But we know the local residents have been concerned in the past about his efforts. He had an application in 2022 that was turned down. They knew about his conviction. Local residents told me they got it blocked on parking grounds because they can't go public with their real concerns for fear potentially of reprisal.
That just says everything about the planning system in the UK, doesn't it? You know, you're not going to block a convicted child sex offender from running a care home for children, but you will block it for the parking.
It's because the people were fearful of putting it out there as well. Charlie Peters, thank you very much indeed for bringing us that exclusive. Truly shocking.
Well, much more to come on Good Afternoon Britain this afternoon. Indeed, we're going to be live in the House of Commons as the Home Secretary delivers a statement on the Southport attack. What will happen? Stay with us.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Rather cloudy once again for many of us, with rain in places but not everywhere. It will be brightest in the north, albeit with a mix of sunny spells and showers for Scotland and Northern Ireland, with low pressure to the northwest. This low to the southwest will produce an awful lot of cloud across England and Wales, and a slow-moving front which has effectively stalled through North Wales and Northern England. That continues to bring outbreaks of light rain and drizzle. In the south, there will be a few cloud breaks, but on the whole, it's a cloudy day and temperatures will reach 5 to 7 Celsius. Further north, with any brighter spells, 8 Celsius possible. Quite a few showers coming into the west of Scotland. Now into Tuesday afternoon, we're going to see further showers arriving into northern and western Scotland, but the best of any sunshine and clear spells as we go into the evening will be across eastern and southern Scotland, as well as parts of Northern Ireland. Into northern England, and we've got a lot of cloud and outbreaks of rain. Likewise for north and west Wales, 1 or 2 showers for Devon and Cornwall. And a lot of cloud there for southern areas. Low cloud, some mist patches forming overnight in places as well. And we'll see the odd fog patch for Scotland and Northern Ireland, where we do have lengthy clear spells. As the night goes on, the rain across northern England and Wales sinks into the Midlands. We'll also see some rain breaking out for southern counties of England. 3 or 4 Celsius in the south, a touch of frost further north where we've got any prolonged clear spells, and a few fog patches first thing. Now, Wednesday morning starts off dreary across the Midlands, the south and southeast of England. The cloud and rain slowly peters out and moves southeastwards. Brighter skies follow for the north and west, albeit with a few showers. Highs of 5 to 7 Celsius.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Imagine how £50,000 in cash from us could make your new year go with a bang.
Hi, my name's Victoria. I won the Spring Great British giveaway. So the day we got the money in our bank account, everything just felt a lot lighter. I would say if you're thinking about entering, just enter.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Estelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
This was thought to be a Ruskin. Ruskin was a very considerable polymath, an artist as well as many other things. So do you know why it was submitted for reappraisal? Was there a bit of a suspicion that it had been misidentified?
No, as you say, you know, it's a service that Christie's offer. You can submit an artwork that you have, so anyone can submit it and request an estimate, and then the auction house's appraisal service allows you space as well to describe it and ask for evaluation. And Christie's sort of looked at it behind the sheet of dirty old glass and recognised a sort of Turner-esque mood and feel and ambience about it. And because there was this close relationship between Ruskin and Turner, which is fascinating, we'll come on to that shortly, but they sort of felt, well, the brushstrokes are very strong, the line is very economic, and the colour of the palette seems to be rather Turner-esque. And then they called in a specialist paper historian who confirmed that actually the paper that was used was one that Turner favoured himself. So yes, it was originally considered to be by Ruskin, but then we discovered something more magnificent. And don't forget, what's really interesting, now it's for sale. The lucky buyer is not just buying a picture. The lucky buyer is buying a life story, a relationship that actually changed the course of art history because of the relationship between Ruskin and Turner themselves.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Tuesday, the 21st of January. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
Well, the Prime Minister launches an inquiry into the clear and repeated failures that led to the Southport stabbings, adding the definition of terrorism may now be changed to reflect attacks like this one. We'll hear live from the Home Secretary this hour.
This as the Prime Minister reveals he did know more about the Southport attackers' terror links in the wake of the attack, but claims he could not reveal these details to the public for fear of prejudicing the trial. Do you buy it?
Do you buy it? And across the pond, America's golden age has begun, according to the president. He signed a raft of executive orders, including exiting the World Health Organization, pardoning the January the 6th rioters, and declaring an emergency on the southern borders. We'll have the latest.
Now, do stay with us. In the next 10 to 15 minutes, we will be hearing live from the Home Secretary on what precisely the scope of this inquiry will be. We might hear more about the terror definition changes, and we certainly will hear those questions that we need asked of government about who knew what and when. Yes, I'm very interested to see what type of questions are asked of the Home Secretary, whether there'll be some politicians in the room who might have a lot to say or a lot to ask. But I don't know if you've seen this row, Tom. Elon Musk apparently has been accused of, a certain hand gesture that looks reminiscent of a Nazi salute. There you go, Elon Musk. Isn't it?
So would you say that's a Nazi salute, Tom?
I'd say it looks like one, but I think this is the problem of a non-politician getting into politics enthusiastically.
Gosh, we're seeing it a lot of times now.
We really are. There's probably quite enough of that. What are people trying to say here?
They're trying to say he's a Nazi, aren't they?
People trying to say... OK, so
Owen Jones shared it with glee.
Oh, say Elon Musk was secretly a Nazi. Say that the guy that does all the rockets... I mean, I suppose the Nazis did rockets too, fair enough. Say he is secretly a Nazi.
Yeah.
Would he really, in front of the world's media, in front of every camera... What did he... I mean, what... Yeah, people who are saying he deliberately did this or this reveals something about him, they must think the guy's either a moron or self-destructive or, like, how can you possibly...
He was doing a heart thump, wasn't he?
How can you possibly make the argument in any logical way that he would decide to get up there in front of the Trump stage and do a Nazi salute? It obviously wasn't intentional.
Well, let's have a look also, because it's been pointed out that quite a few former presidents have also made a similar salute, if you could call it that. So there you go. There's Kamala Harris in the middle. You've got Obama too. You've got Hillary Clinton. Who else have you got
Elizabeth Warren there.
Oh, yes.
Or as Donald Trump might call her, Pocahontas.
Yeah, someone's done a little montage. So It does seem as though this might be quite a natural move for some politicians to make.
I think
Elon Musk isn't a politician, of course. Well,
do you know what? Hitler was a really bad guy. He ruined a perfectly decent moustache. He ruined a Roman salute. He ruined, well, most of Europe. And I think we just need to add these things to the long list of things that we should really hate Adolf Hitler for.
Yes.
Yeah, the genocide, the war, making architecture in England uglier because of all the bombing. The little moustache, no one can have it now. Charlie Chaplin, I mean, looks more ridiculous than he did before. And of course, the salute, which used to be an American salute. Children in America, when they said the Pledge of Allegiance at the start of school days and all the rest of it, they used to do that salute, and they stopped during the Second World War because Hitler ruined it, as he ruined just about everything he touched.
Well, there you go, but it's something for the left to get all their knickers in a twist about, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's just so disingenuous.
Yeah,
I mean, like, if you try and apply even a scintilla of logic to it, why would he choose to do that?
Yes,
I mean, it doesn't make sense.
I mean, unless he felt so brazen, you know. GBNews. We're going to Yvette Cooper. She has now stood up in the House.
Joy turned into the darkest of nightmares. And we think especially of three little girls, Elsie Dot Stankham, B.B. King, and Alice De Silva Aguiar. Their precious smiles and the dreams that their families had. And we think of their families' agony to have that future so brutally destroyed. They are in all our hearts and prayers, as are those who survived the attack but who live with the physical and emotional scars. And nothing will ever take away their trauma and loss, and we will ensure that they receive the support and care they need in the years to come. We think too of the police and first responders who ran into that scene of unspeakable horror. The courage they showed and the lives they saved is public service at its very best. Yesterday, Axel Rudakabana pled guilty to all charges. He stands responsible for one of the most barbaric crimes in our country's history. The most vile and cowardly attack on little children who could never defend themselves, carried out in the most horrific and traumatic way. The CPS has described him as a young man with a sickening and sustained interest in death and violence, who has shown no sign of remorse. On Thursday before sentencing, the prosecution will set out what happened that day and the nature of those offences. But, Mr. Speaker, now that the conviction has been secured, the families, the people of Southport and the entire country need answers about how this horrendous attack could ever have happened. The government has been constrained in what we could say up to this point about Rudakabana's past to avoid prejudicing any jury trial in line with all the normal rules of our British justice systems, because nothing was more important than securing justice. But now we can start to lay out that background. Multiple different agencies were in contact with Rudakabana and knew about his history of violence. He was referred 3 times to Prevent between December 2019 and April 2021, when aged 13 and 14. Between October 2019 and May 2022, Lancashire Police responded to 5 calls from his home address about his behaviour. He was referred repeatedly to the multi-agency safeguarding hub. He had contact with Children's Social Care, the Early Help Service, Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services. He was convicted of a violent assault against another child at school and was referred to the Youth Offending Team. He was excluded from one school. He had long periods of absence from another. All those agencies had contact with him. Yet between them, they completely failed to identify the terrible danger that he posed. How did he fall through so many gaps? It is just unbearable to think that something more could and should have been done. So there are grave questions about how this network of agencies failed to identify and act on the risks. There were so many signs of how dangerous he had become, yet the action against him was far too weak. So families need the truth about why the system failed to tackle his violence for so many years. That is why we are setting up an independent public inquiry. Like the Angelini inquiry into Wayne Couzens, it will begin work initially on a non-statutory basis so that it can move quickly into action, but with statutory powers added later as required. We will set out the terms of reference and appoint the chair once we have consulted the coroner and given the families the opportunity to comment. And in addition to examining what went wrong in this horrific case, I am also asking the inquiry to consider the wider challenge of rising youth violence and extremism. Because I have been deeply disturbed at the number of cases involving teenagers drawn into extremism, serious violence and terrorism, including Islamist extremism, far-right extremism, mixed and confused ideology, and the obsession with violence and gore. There has been a 3-fold increase in under-18s investigated for involvement in terrorism in just 3 years. 162 people were referred to Prevent last year for concerns relating to school massacres. The Met Commissioner has warned about young men who are fixated on violence grazing across extremist and terrorist content online. And Five Eyes counter-terror partners have warned about growing radicalization of minors, happening as so many of our children and teenagers are being exposed to ever more disturbing materials online, an online ecosystem that is radicalizing our children while safety measures are whittled away. The Online Safety Act illegal content codes of practice come into force in March, and the child safety codes should be in place this summer. but companies should take responsibility before them. The prosecution will provide more detail on Thursday about material Radicalization searched for online, but I can tell the House the government is this week contacting technology companies to ask them to remove dangerous material that he accessed. Companies should not be profiting from hosting content that puts children's lives at risk. And let me set out 4 other areas where we're taking action in advance of the inquiry. Firstly, on prevent. The government and counter-terrorism policing jointly commissioned an immediate prevent learning review during the summer, and I will publish detailed findings following the sentencing. The 3 referrals took place between 3 and 4 years before the Southport attack, including following evidence that he was expressing interest in school shootings, in the London Bridge attack, the IRA, MI5, and the Middle East. On each occasion, Radicalizations's case was assessed by counter-terrorism policing, but in each case, there was no onward referral to specialist channel support. The learning review has concluded the referrals should not have been closed, and that cases such as these, given his age and complex needs, should be referred to channel. It concludes that too much weight was placed on the absence of ideology without considering the vulnerabilities to radicalization or taking account of whether he was obsessed with massacre or extreme violence. And the cumulative significance of those 3 repeat referrals was not properly considered. Mr. Speaker, the PREVENT programme is vital for our national security, and its officers work with huge dedication to keep us safe. But we need it to be effective. Some changes have already been made since 2021, including new prevent duty guidance, new training for frontline workers on radicalisation, stronger policy on repeat referrals. And in September 2024, a new prevent assessment framework was launched, supplemented by robust training for all prevent police officers. But these changes do not go far enough. Given the importance of the programme, I cannot understand how it has been allowed to operate for so long without proper independent oversight. That is why I announced before Christmas the introduction of a new independent Prevent Commissioner with the power to review cases and to ensure that standards are being met. So I'm today appointing Lord David Anderson, KC, as an interim Prevent Commissioner to start work immediately, and his first task will be to conduct a thorough review of the Prevent history in this case to identify what changes are needed to make sure serious cases are not missed, particularly where there is mixed and unclear ideology. I've also tasked my department to conduct an end-to-end review of Prevent thresholds, including on Islamist extremism, where referrals have previously been too low. And we're looking at cases where mental ill health or neurodivergence is a factor and developing new arrangements with other agencies which may not meet the threshold for channel counter-extremism support, but where violent behaviour urgently must be addressed. Second, 2 shocking facts around knife crime emerged from this case. The Prevent Learning Review found that Radicalization admitted to having carried a knife more than 10 times, yet the action against him was far too weak. And despite the fact that he'd been convicted for violence and was just 17, he was easily able to order a knife on Amazon. That's a total disgrace, and it must change. So we will bring in stronger measures to tackle knife sales online in the Crime and Policing Bill this spring. Mr. Speaker, thirdly, as the Prime Minister has set out this morning, we need to ensure our laws keep up with the changing violent and extremist threats we face. It is for the police and CPS to decide whether individual cases meet the definitions set out in the Terrorism Act 2000 when making charges. But given the growing number of cases where perpetrators are seeking to terrorise, even without a clear ideology, we need to ensure the law, powers and sentencing are strong enough to cope. I have therefore asked the independent reviewer on terrorism powers to examine the legislation in this area in the light of the modern threats we face. Finally, Mr. Speaker, let me address the issues of contempt of court. Because the British way of justice means information is presented to the court by the police and CPS with restrictions on what can be said beforehand, so the jury does not get partial or prejudicial information in advance to make sure that the trial is fair and justice is done. Social media puts those long-established rules under strain, especially where partial and inaccurate information appears online. And the Law Commission is reviewing the contempt of court rules in that light. But let me be clear. Where the police, government and journalists are given clear advice from the CPS about contempt of court and about not publishing information in advance of a trial, if we did not respect that and a killer walked free, we would never be forgiven. Mr. Speaker, there are times when something so unfathomably terrible happens that whatever words we find feel grossly insufficient. And that is how it feels over the Southport attack. So let there be no doubt. Responsibility for this outrage lies squarely with the perpetrator, but equally, in the wake of such a monstrous atrocity, we have to ask every question, no matter how difficult, and where change is needed, we must act. That is now our task. We owe that to the victims, to their loved ones, and we owe it to the country, because protecting the public is the first duty of the government and the shared purpose of this House. I commend this statement to the House.
Right, let us start and we'll get everybody in who was there on time. Can I come now to the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Phil?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Home Secretary for advance sight of her statement and for the briefing which she very kindly arranged. Firstly, let us remember the 3 young, innocent victims of this savage and senseless attack. BB King was just 6 years old. Elsie Stankham was 7, and Alice Da Silva Aguiar 9 years old. Their lives were cruelly cut short as they attended a Taylor Swift dance class. It should have been a time of joy, part of a precious and innocent childhood, to be cherished and remembered. And yet, the darkest of shadows fell over Southport that day as these girls were robbed of their young lives. Let us not forget that 8 more children and 2 adults were seriously injured on that day as well. Many of us in this House are parents or grandparents, and many people listening will be as well. We can only begin to imagine the pain and grief the parents and family of baby Elsie and Alice must now be feeling. And of course, we should recognise and thank the first responders who arrived on the scene. So, Mr. Speaker, we owe it to the memory of those children and to their bereaved parents to learn the lessons from this terrible incident and to take steps to make sure it doesn't happen again. And so, in that spirit, I welcome and support the inquiry announced yesterday. I asked the Home Secretary to confirm that it will be placed on a statutory footing as soon as possible to ensure its independence and also to enable it to compel disclosure of the evidence which it may need. It is vital to get to the truth about what opportunities may have existed to stop the evil perpetrator, Axel Radicalization, from committing these sickening murders. Radicalization was encountered multiple times, as the Home Secretary said, by the police, social services, the school system and the Prevent programme over a period of several years. The inquiry will find out, I hope, whether mistakes were made or whether the law needs to change. And the Home Secretary mentioned some areas that will rightly be looked at, and I support that. I hope the Home Secretary can also confirm this will include consideration of whether the Mental Health Act was adequate for this case. The Home Secretary has also rightly referred to Prevent. A review of Prevent was conducted by William Shawcross, and the last government responded in February 2024. Will the Home Secretary now commit to implementing all of the recommendations of the Shawcross review? Let me now turn to what happened after the murders and to the importance of openness and transparency. Firstly, and this is a very serious and important question, will the Home Secretary confirm that the inquiry will also cover the government, police and CPS response to the murders, and especially the handling of public communications and the appalling riots that followed? It's a very important question. I would be grateful if the Home Secretary would directly answer that in her response. Now, the Prime Minister this morning acknowledged that he knew about the background to the case and to Radicalization himself, including the fact that he had been referred to Prevent on 3 separate occasions, and that Radicalization had been found to be in possession of ricin, a highly toxic chemical, and a manual detailing al-Qaeda terrorist methods, itself an offence under the Terrorism Act. The Prime Minister also said this morning that he did not disclose any of this to the public in the days and weeks after the murders for fear of prejudicing the subsequent murder trial. And it is, of course, important for journalists and for politicians, and indeed this House, to do nothing that might prejudice a trial. But David Hall, KC, the independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, said this on the Today programme in the context of this case in October, and it bears quoting in full. Jonathan Hall said this: "The government has to be aware that if there is an information gap, then other voices, particularly on social media, will fill that gap." He went on, "If there is any information you can give, put it in the public domain, and be really careful you don't fall into the trap of saying, we can say zilch because there are criminal proceedings. Quite often," he said, "there is a fair amount that can be put into the public domain." Jonathan Hall concluded by saying, "The police now realise that just saying there is a charge, we can't say any more, is not going to cut it these days." So the independent reviewer is saying that the government and police can put some material into the public domain without prejudicing subsequent trials. And in fact, on October the 29th, Radicalization was charged with possessing the ricin and the terror manual. That was then made public. So if it can be made public in October without risking prejudice of the murder trial, it follows that it could have been made public in August without prejudicing that same trial. Background facts on other cases over the years have been made public after arrest and before trial without prejudice, and the shields relating to 2 of those cases are in this chamber. So why did the Prime Minister not make public some of this background information in August when he knew it, when later disclosure of that information in October demonstrated such disclosure could be made without prejudice? And why did the Deputy Prime Minister on July the 31st dismiss as, and I quote, fake news those saying there may be further facts to come out? Let me just briefly, Mr. Speaker, before concluding, explain why this is important. As Jonathan Hall said, if there is a void, then misinformation, especially online, can fill that void. And this appears to be what happened here. And some of that information, it is said, originated overseas from hostile states. It is possible, indeed, it is even likely, that this misinformation that was put into the void fueled the totally unacceptable riots we then subsequently saw. So, will the Home Secretary accept, given what I've just said and what Jonathan Hall said, does she accept there should and could have been more openness and transparency, as I just set out, without prejudicing the trial, and that disclosing more of that truth openly and transparently would have helped combat the damaging misinformation that circulated and which arguably fueled the riots? Will she confirm the inquiry will look at that aspect of events? Mr. Speaker, this was an appalling tragedy. Young girls murdered with their whole lives ahead of them. Let us all learn the lessons from this tragedy in honour of their memory.
Home Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the Shadow Home Secretary raised a series of points, which is obviously a substantial shift in position for him and his party from the position they've taken in government. He asked about whether the status of the inquiry. I can confirm it's going to start quickly on a non-statutory basis in the same way that the Angelini inquiry did, but I can confirm it will be given whatever power powers it needs, including on a statutory basis, so that it can get any information that it needs. He referred to the Shawcross review. I can confirm that the government has implemented 33 out of the 34 recommendations, but I would just gently point out to him that actually the approach that the Shawcross review took was to say that the PREVENT programme should be narrowed and should actually just focus particularly on the cases around terrorism, and in fact could have put at risk, actually including less cases like this where ideology is less clear. He then raises the issue about the information that was provided, and he will know that the Contempt of Court Act was set out in 1981. The Jonathan Hall has indeed highlighted the problem of disinformation online, social media actors who are not bound by the same rules that the police, the media and the government follow, and he refers, for example, to the name and the nationality being provided, which in practice they were in this case after misinformation appeared online. But ultimately he has also said all of this is governed by the Contempt of Court Act 1981, and the Law Commission is reviewing that. But it is not for the government to ignore the law or the advice that we are given when justice for families is at stake. And let me point out to him that the previous Conservative government did not publish information before the trial about the PREVENT referral for the perpetrator who killed Sir David Amis. None of us criticised them for that because none of us wanted to put at risk justice for Sir David's family, nor did they publish information before the trial on the PREVENT referral of the asylum seeker who killed Tom Roberts. In fact, they didn't even publish that after the trial. It only came out in the inquest, and the minister, who even after the trial refused to answer my questions on whether they knew that he was wanted for murdering 2 people in Serbia when he was allowed to enter the country, was the current Shadow Justice Secretary. Now, we have been keen to publish the information on PREVENT referrals from the start, but throughout, the advice to us has been clear. And if we had ignored the advice that we were given from about the case that put towards us and about the information that the police and the CPS were working through in order to get justice, and if as a result a killer had walked free, no one would ever have forgiven the government or anyone else. The most important thing is to get justice, and then once justice is secured, to make sure at this point the questions are answered about what went wrong and why 3 young girls' lives were lost. That is the question he should be focusing on right now.
Patrick Hurley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, we've been listening to a barnstorming back and forth in the House of Commons between the Home Secretary and Shadow Home Secretary. Rest assured, we will be back in the Commons with relevant information, because it's clear this debate is going to go on and on. With us in the studio is our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. And Mark, we were just discussing, as we were hearing that back and forth, my goodness me, tensions running high, and it's clear to see why.
Yes, and I think, you know, Chris Philpin, listening to the points that he was making to the Home Secretary, I think really got to the nub of the issue with regard to some of the information that was out there. For instance, the charges related to the possession of terrorism documents linked to Al-Qaeda, the production of the biological toxin ricin, were later added to the indictment. The public were alerted to that. I was in Liverpool and attended that briefing where they made public the 2 additional charges. He, I think, rightly pointed out, if you can, in late October of last year, announce these additional charges without prejudicing any coming trial, then why can't you do that much earlier on in these proceedings? Because remember, with the biological toxin and with that Al-Qaeda related document, that was discovered in Axel Rudakabana's house just a day or two after the attacks and was identified as ricin and also then identified as an Al-Qaeda linked document within just a day or so of that. A very short time period, but 3 months went by before the government, before the authorities decided to add 2 additional charges and then alert the public. It just compounds the suspicion, I think, that many people across the country have, that information was somehow suppressed. In fact, the government, in the form of the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, and again, Yvette Cooper, have confirmed that. They did know, but they didn't reveal that to the public. They say because of the right consideration about the fair trial ahead and a determination not to lead to anything that might prejudice that trial, a collapse of the trial, which Yvette Cooper said would be viewed by the public as unforgivable. But having covered many of these court cases over the years, I honestly think, and many other pretty objective sort of viewers of what has been going on here believe that this whole prejudicial line has been overplayed here, that there is information. You heard that from the independent reviewer of terrorism as well, that the information out there could have been supplemented with some more information that would have helped combat the vacuum that was being filled by this social media maelstrom of misinformation that just added to the anger and the perception that the public weren't being told everything.
Exactly the same answer that Keir Starmer gave this morning at the press conference, all about contempt of court, all about sticking by the rules, not wanting to prejudice a trial. It's the right thing. We go by the rules. This is what we do as a country, and that's the right thing. So basically, shh about your concerns about lack of transparency or lack of openness. But at the time, there were so many different theories going around. Lots of people felt as though this lack of information about the perpetrator, this lack of information about a potential motive was fueling the disorder, was fueling the riots. And Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper, they do talk a lot about misinformation being shared online, disinformation. They could have put some of that to bed. They could have tried and put a lid on that in some way.
Well, especially, I think, Emily, given that the information that they would have been revealing, such as the prevent referrals, perhaps, or even if not put explicitly like that, confirmation that he was known to the authorities, confirmation of the discovery of ricin, of terrorism literature that then formed the basis of a charge. This was all going to be put before the jury anyway in the forthcoming trial. The prosecutors would have relied on that in the case against Axel Rudikabana if this had actually gone to a full-blown trial. So they wouldn't be putting anything in the public domain that the jury wouldn't be hearing about anyway in the fullness of time.
It's clear that the Home Secretary doesn't have a leg to stand on when it comes to the information that we knew by October, because, of course, October was before the trial was due to start anyway. We could have known about the ricin. We could have known about the Al-Qaeda manual much, much earlier. But where Yvette Cooper was perhaps strongest in her comeback to the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, was in mentioning 2 cases where the previous government also covered up the facts of one of these acts of terrorism. We were not told about the murderer of Sir David Amess and the prevent referrals that man had been given, that Islamist terrorist. And similarly, the asylum seeker who stabbed to death that pensioner in Hartlepool. We were not told the information about that until months after, until, frankly, it had slipped out of the news agenda. Only then were we told that was a terrorist attack. I think a lot of people watching at home might not know that there was a terror attack in Hartlepool because of the way the information did not come out. I mean, the previous administration, or ministry, I should say, is equally to blame.
Yes, I think that is a very good point. And, that was a point that Yvette Cooper wanted to hammer home in rebuttal there. There's no doubt that the previous government as well was just as guilty of not putting information into the public domain that perhaps could have been to allay concerns, to fully disinfect the narrative that might have been been out there, the rumours that were going swirling around social media, as often happens any time we get an incident that looks like it may well be a terrorist attack. So she certainly had a point there. But I think going back to this point with regard to whether a trial could be prejudiced or not, in the fullness of time, these facts will be put before a jury. Judges tell a jury to just ignore all of the noises off, to concentrate on the evidence that will put before them and nothing but the evidence that will be put before them. And there's another imperative here of getting information out in a timely manner for the public at a time of, well, when we're talking about Southport, of very significant disorder that was breaking out across the country because of a perception that the government wasn't telling them all the facts. Now we've had the confirmation from the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary that yes, indeed, they weren't being told all the facts. You've got to weigh up, as well as the need to have a fair trial at the end of the day that is not prejudice, the public mood and the potential for serious disorder that we saw erupting because of this vacuum that was being filled by all of this disinformation. Actually, I say disinformation, you know, in the fullness of time, some of what was being said online was actually accurate.
Yes, some of it was true. Interestingly, she did say that the Law Commission are reviewing this Contempt of Court Act 1981. Well,
and I think that is an acknowledgement without actually acknowledging it, that perhaps they've been erring too much on the side of we can't go and prejudice a trial, and perhaps now they will be a little more able to say things going forward. Because I can tell you, speaking as I do to members of the police service across the country, there's been deep frustration over recent years at what they see as a default position now from the Crown Prosecution Service, that you can't provide information that they would like to provide to the public for fear of prejudicing a trial.
Well, Mark, do stay with us. There is plenty more to get stuck into, not least these potential sweeping powers the government's about to take over social media. So many mentions there from the Home Secretary about what exactly it was Axel Ridicabana accessed online. No doubt much more to learn, and we all across it here at GB News. Do not go anywhere. Also, has a golden age of America begun? Coming up also on the show. Do stay with us.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Rather cloudy once again for many of us, with rain in places but not everywhere. It will be brightest in the north, albeit with a mix of sunny spells and showers for Scotland and Northern Ireland, with low pressure to the northwest. This low to the southwest will produce an awful lot of cloud across England and Wales, and a slow-moving front which is effectively stalled through North Wales and Northern England. That continues to bring outbreaks of light rain and drizzle. In the south, there will be a few cloud breaks, but on the whole, it's a cloudy day and temperatures will reach 5 to 7 Celsius. Further north, with any brighter spells, 8 Celsius possible. Quite a few showers coming into the west of Scotland. Now into Tuesday afternoon, we're going to see further showers arriving into northern and western Scotland, but the best of any sunshine and clear spells as we go into the evening will be across eastern and southern Scotland, as well as parts of Northern Ireland. Into northern England, and we've got a lot of cloud and outbreaks of rain, likewise for north and west Wales. 1 or 2 showers for Devon and Cornwall, and a lot of cloud there for southern areas. Low cloud, some mist patches forming overnight in places as well. And we'll see the odd fog patch for Scotland and Northern Ireland, where we do have lengthy clear spells. As the night goes on, the rain across northern England and Wales sinks into the Midlands. We'll also see some rain breaking out for southern counties of England. 3 or 4 Celsius in the south, a touch of frost further north where we've got any prolonged clear spells, and a few fog patches first thing. Now, Wednesday morning starts off dreary across the Midlands, the south and southeast of England. The cloud and rain slowly peters out and moves southeastwards. Brighter skies follow for the north and west, albeit with a few showers. Highs of 5 to 7 Celsius.
The latest GB News travel. Good afternoon, I'm Russell Holding. In Aberdeenshire, the A96 is closed westbound from the Kinella roundabout to the Broomhill roundabout at Kintore after a vehicle caught fire earlier. There are delays of up to half an hour to trains between Preston and Wigan North Western because of track safety checks. On the M6 from Warwickshire into the West Midlands, the inside lane's closed northbound after an accident between junctions 4A and 5 from the M42 to Castle Bromwich. It's taking around 40 minutes in queues back beyond junction 4. In Suffolk, the A12 is closed in both directions over the Gull Wing Bridge in Lowestoft because of a technical problem causing queues. There are delays of up to 2.5 hours to Irish ferry sailings between Dover and Calais because of poor weather conditions, and Gatwick Express train services are suspended, with Southern and Thameslink reporting delays of up to half an hour, with some cancelled trains between East Croydon and Brighton.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 1:40 and we are, of course, going to be returning to our lead story. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has been in the House of Commons. She says action taken against Axel Ritter-Cabana was far too weak, and despite the fact he'd been convicted for violence and was just 17, he was easily able to order a knife on Amazon. She was also pressed on the issue of what was known when, whether the idea that contempt of court was the true reason why some of the information about this crime was withheld from the public. Again, just saying contempt of court.
There is a huge amount to get into here because it does seem that the government was acting on some advice, but then there was some information that was released before the trial went ahead anyway, or was due to start anyway. So there's so many different angles here, and of course we're going to be covering it all on GB News. But just for a second, we're hopping across the pond. A golden age of America has begun. That's the message from the new president, Donald Trump, sworn in, of course, as the 47th president yesterday.
Yes, almost straight away, he was seen signing off on a raft of executive orders. They included withdrawing the US from the World Health Organization, an order to make it official policy that there are only two genders, male and female, if you were wondering, and an executive order temporarily delaying the ban on TikTok.
Well, here in the studio is the Global Affairs correspondent at the iPaper, Molly Blackall. Molly, dozens of executive orders.
Yes.
And a strange sort of press conference. As Trump was sort of signing these off, people were asking him all sorts of questions, and he was just sort of, well, much more open, I think, than the last president, for better or ill. This is a flurry of activity.
It is. I mean, he's had a fairly sort of busy first 24 hours back in office. I think it's really hard to tell with Trump, as per usual, what in this is sort of rhetoric and narrative and potentially even a bit of sort of fun, and what is a sort of serious play at policy, effectively. Trump sort of deals in unpredictability, which makes our jobs talking about what he's doing incredibly difficult. But there are some sort of serious undertones around this. He's clearly got his eye on shaking up geopolitics. One of the executive orders was renaming the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. I'm not sure where that came from, but it has happened or is happening. But there are more serious points to that. I think Ukraine is a really key question, which lots of people here in the UK and across our NATO allies are going to be asking. Trump has said repeatedly, or indicated at least, that he would like to withdraw some of the US military aid which is going to Ukraine. And NATO allies, including here in the UK, have really been very alarmed by that. That could really tip the scales in Putin's favour. But on the other hand, he's also said he wants to end the war almost immediately. And we've seen, you know, he did seem to sway that in Gaza. He seemed to have, you know, big influence on drawing that to a close. So potentially we could be seeing finally a resolution to the conflict in Ukraine.
I mean, it was quite the sight. Should we have a little look at Tom's montage of Donald Trump signing off some of these executive orders?
This is an executive order taking a large number of executive actions to secure our southern border. Okay. There's a declaration of a national energy emergency. There's a proclamation declaring a national emergency at the southern border of the United States. Creating and implementing the Department of Governmental Efficiency, known as DOGE, designating the cartels and other organizations to be foreign terrorist organizations, unleashing Alaska's potential as an energy reservoir for the entire nation, withdrawing from the World Health Organization. Ooh, that's a big one. Reforming the system of hiring in federal government to ensure that merit is the lodestar of hiring decisions.
As per the Supreme Court.
Did you sign the TikTok order?
Yeah.
Yes, that was just signed.
Just signed it.
signed it.
Goodness me! So from Alaska's energy reservoir to a crisis on the southern border, a national emergency, to postponing the ban on TikTok. I mean, there's just name any policy under the sun. He's just signed an order on it.
There's very little he hasn't touched, I think, left around the world. I mean, while it is objectively, I think, quite funny to see him sort of whittling through these, like, you know, a menu at a restaurant and sort of oohing at pulling out of the World Health Organization. That's a big one. It is a big one, Donald Trump. It is a very big one. And I do hope that enough thought has been given to all of these, because they are being rattled through on day one, and they do have some serious implications for global partners. The tariffs is a big one here in the UK. Not very much on that from the off, but Donald Trump has said, or at least threatened to, impose some very large tariffs on imports coming into the US. The US is the UK's largest single country trading partner. That could potentially have some real economic impacts on us here in the UK at a time where I think we can all agree we really don't want any more economic hardship. So lots of fun potentially going on in the White House, and hopefully some positive moves on Ukraine. But I think it'd be quite interesting to see how all of this pans out.
Also, I find it so funny almost how Davos is at the moment, right? It's all taking place, the World Economic Forum, the global elites hobnobbing together, and they're all talking about how we can safeguard the climate. Meanwhile, one of these executive orders that Trump has taken is to essentially do away with the Paris Accords, all these climate accords, net zero, forgotten about that.
Yeah, and it actually puts the US now with only Iran, Yemen and Libya as the countries outside of the Paris Climate Agreement, so make of that what you will. I think it's effectively the sort of scrapping, really, of the US having any interest in climate initiatives, and certainly more interest in drilling oil. I mean, 2024 was the hottest year on record, so I think there are certainly going to be some people getting a little concerned by some of what's being passed in the White House at the moment.
This, of course, is what the president can do as the executive. But we know that there's a divided government in America, designed so that ambition counteracts ambition, that no significant legislation can be passed without the will of the lower house of the House of Representatives, the Senate and the president. Oh, and it's got to match the Constitution as well, so the Supreme Court sometimes sticks its oar in. I wonder what more can be done by executive action. Some of these seem pretty sweeping. There is always the risk that courts will get involved, and some of these might not be as fully fledged as first appear.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, this is day one. This is effectively day one, and we've got 4 years ahead. So certainly, you know, the path of the Trump presidency, I'm sure, is sort of still being ironed out, even within Trump's own head. But you mentioned the sort of, you know, the courts and things. It's important to note that Donald Trump did sort of stack the US Supreme Court, which is the top legal authority in the country, to a sort of Republican leaning. So it's very likely that they at least will be leaning towards the kind of initiatives that he wants to push through. But certainly it's all still to play for. I mean, the role that Elon Musk might play in all of this is also going to be very new. So I think it's very difficult to come on and make predictions on what this is all going to mean for the rest of the world, because I'm not sure Trump even knows.
It's a sign of intent, isn't it, what he signed off last night. Molly Blackall, thank you very much indeed, Global Affairs correspondent at the iPaper.
Well, do stay with us. Of course, we're going to be back with that Southport news. What will this inquiry entail? But before then, are you in search for some winter sun? Here's the European holiday destination forecast.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Some winter sunshine likely for the next couple of days in Sardinia and also Sicily, but some showers in Cyprus and some pretty wet conditions across the Canaries and Madeira for the next couple of days. The same weather system bringing soggy skies to Portugal also, and some wet weather across southern parts of France, some snow over the Alps. Showers in Cyprus, they'll still be there on Thursday, but they should be easing by Friday, and the rain in the Canaries will be easing by Friday as well, and temperatures over 20 degrees here.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
TikTok chefs, Instagram chefs, that they put children off or young people off of cooking because it's so expertly done that they can't do it. No, my young lad, he's 17, he is amazing in the kitchen. Oh, he is. He's amazing in the kitchen. And he gets it all off TikTok. He comes down, he can put burgers, wraps, stews, curries, sauces, and the smells in the kitchen. I said, where'd you get these? Oh, just TikTok, I'm trying it out. And it's just amazing the things that he can conjure up. So for some people, it might be... it's an inspiration for him. So they're saying that's intimidation. For my boy, it's an inspiration. They say it's entertainment. For my boy, it's an infomercial. I watch him doing his stuff. At that stage, I could do baked beans on toast and knock up a salad. That was it. But my boy can do all sorts of stuff.
It makes it accessible as well, doesn't it? Because lots of people say, like, you need an education to be in the kitchen, or you need to go find yourself loads of cookbooks. But you don't.
No.
You go on your phone now.
Well, I mean, like, all the spices, sesame oil. I mean, I'm amazed at the stuff that he does. So it's encouraging. All you just need is a kitchen well-stocked and have a go. And understand that failure is actually the route to learning. I mean, he's made mistakes, he's stuck stuff in the bin, but that young man, I am amazed at some of the stuff he does.
I don't mind cooking at all. It's cleaning up that I have the problem with. Dawn, let's talk about sex.
Can I just say there are things called restaurants, by the way? Just put that one. My hell, I don't even know where the kitchen is.
OK.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's just gone 10 to 2, and now it's a smelly mess. No, not the state of politics in the United Kingdom. An 80-foot mountain of fly-tipped rubbish piled high on a country lane in Lichfield.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, it left residents and businesses stranded, unable to access their homes or other properties.
There's no excuse for that. The massive heap of waste, estimated to rise to about 10 feet in height, was said to have been bigger than 2 double-decker buses combined, and the festering pile could be smelled from quite the distance.
Well, joining us now is GB News West Midlands reporter Jack Carson in Lichfield for us. Jack, have they cleared up the mess?
Well, look at this. Look. Road is, but that is certainly not what the story was this morning and yesterday when, as you were saying there, people trapped in their homes. It really is the only way in and out of this road in the past few days because of nearby building work and construction work, meaning the other end of this lane was already blocked off and road closed. So that fly-tipped rubbish, which, as you were mentioning, covered the whole width of this road. The picture is absolutely incredible of just how much rubbish was tipped here. Much of it, the Environmental Agency and Lichfield District Council telling us, was construction rubbish. When I was here witnessing it being cleared away, there were PVC pipes, there was what looked to be insulation as well. And we spoke to the Environmental Protection Manager from Lichfield District Council, Jack Toomey. He spoke to us earlier on.
Got a good track record of dealing with fly tipping in the district, quite a few prosecutions. We can even seize vehicles associated with the waste, so if we can locate the company or people involved, we would look to seize the vehicles that have been involved in this. Obviously this is incredibly rare. We deal with a lot of fly tipping, but it tends to be a few bags of waste up to maybe a transit load, but this is very rare. I mean, I've done this for 25 years. This is the biggest fly tip I've ever dealt with.
Well, Jack, thank you so much for bringing us that. I can't believe that picture of that. It's just quite incredible what people do. I mean, just don't fly tip like that, you absolute slob.
Absolutely. If you want to fly tip, perhaps go to a different country. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. There's plenty more to come on today's programme, however, and it won't be quite as full of rubbish as that last segment. Well, we're going to be back in the House of Commons, of course. Yvette Cooper has been spelling out the details of what this inquiry into Southport will look like, but does it also mean a crackdown on social media? We'll be exploring that question after your very latest weather forecast.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Rather cloudy once again for many of us, with rain in places but not everywhere. It will be brightest in the north, albeit with a mix of sunny spells and showers for Scotland and Northern Ireland, with low pressure to the northwest. This low to the southwest will produce an awful lot of cloud across England and Wales, and a slow-moving front which has effectively stalled through North Wales and Northern England. That continues to bring outbreaks of light rain and drizzle. In the south, there will be a few cloud breaks, but on the whole, it's a cloudy day and temperatures will reach 5 to 7 Celsius. Further north, with any brighter spells, 8 Celsius possible. Quite a few showers coming into the west of Scotland. Now into Tuesday afternoon, we're going to see further showers arriving into northern and western Scotland, but the best of any sunshine and clear spells as we go into the evening will be across eastern and southern Scotland, as well as parts of Northern Ireland. Into northern England, and we've got a lot of cloud and outbreaks of rain. Likewise for north and west Wales. 1 or 2 showers for Devon and Cornwall. And a lot of cloud there for southern areas. Low cloud, some mist patches forming overnight in places as well. And we'll see the odd fog patch for Scotland and Northern Ireland, where we do have lengthy clear spells. As the night goes on, the rain across northern England and Wales sinks into the Midlands. We'll also see some rain breaking out for southern counties of England. 3 or 4 Celsius in the south, a touch of frost further north where we've got any prolonged clear spells, and a few fog patches first thing. Now, Wednesday morning starts off dreary across the Midlands, the south and southeast of England. The cloud and rain slowly peters out and moves southeastwards. Brighter skies follow for the north and west, albeit with a few showers. Highs of 5 to 7 Celsius.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's just 2 weeks left to grab your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far. £50,000 in tax-free cash. How would you react if you won?
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Amazing, just the best feeling ever.
I'm in shock. That is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Tuesday, the 21st of January. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
The Prime Minister launches an inquiry into the clear and repeated failures that led to the Southport stabbings, adding the definition of terrorism now may be changed to reflect attacks like those of Axel Rudakabana. In the last hour, Yvette Cooper has said that the action against barbaric and cowardly Southport attacker was far too weak. We're hearing from a former Attorney General in the next few minutes.
We are indeed, and this as the Prime Minister reveals he knew about the Southport attacker's terror links in the wake of the attack, but claims he could not reveal these details to the public for fear he could prejudice a trial. Well, this prompted Shadow Home Secretary Chris Phillip to ask this.
So why did the Prime Minister not make public some of this background information in August when he knew it, when later disclosure of that information in October demonstrated such disclosure could be made without prejudice? And why did the Deputy Prime Minister on July the 31st dismiss as, and I quote, fake news, those saying there may be further facts to come out?
Well, across the pond, America's golden age has begun, at least according to President Trump, who's signed a raft of executive orders, including exiting the World Health Organization, declaring an emergency on the southern border, and pardoning January the 6th rioters. We'll have the latest.
Yeah, I think the amount of misinformation, disinformation, whatever you want to call it, online speculation in the wake of the Southport attack was huge. I do believe that had there been more transparency and openness from the offset, I mean, people were speculating about the identity, people were saying that he could be someone who'd just come over on a boat from the Channel. I mean, there was so much that perhaps if he'd just been told a little more, that might have quelled some of those worries.
And then it was months and months and months before we heard about the Al-Qaeda manual, before we heard about the ricin. No doubt much more is going to come out over the next few days. We already heard from the Home Secretary that she seems to know his entire internet history. No doubt we're going to hear a lot of that, particularly on Thursday. What material was this guy looking at online and what implications does that have? It seems a huge amount of Yvette Cooper's statement in the House of Commons was about controlling more of what is available on social media companies. I mean,
censorship is the answer, always.
Is the Home Secretary really suggesting that this was a lovely, quiet, timid little boy until he went on Twitter and then suddenly became a murderer? Because might I suggest that lovely, quiet, timid little boys don't necessarily search out that sort of material in the first place?
That's how he was kind of presented to us, though. You know, with those nice pictures of him as a child. You know, we weren't told that there were any links to anything.
The picture of him that the BBC sort of put him up as, dressed him up as Doctor Who,
yeah,
and had him confronting a campaign. Of course, this is a guy that got suspended from school, tried to attack his fellow school children and teachers, and seemed to have this violent disposition, and was found with a knife on 10 occasions.
Yeah, and people were shamed or called far-right for saying potentially there could be a terror link, and then we find out that there are terror charges. Anyway, gbnews.com/your say. Let us know what you make of it all, but it's your headlines with Sam.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just after 2 o'clock. We'll start with a recap then of the latest developments in the case of Axel Ruder-Cabana. The Home Secretary has called his case one of the most barbaric as she announced a public inquiry into the Southport incident. Yvette Cooper said the 18-year-old who admitted carrying a knife over 10 times before his deadly rampage should have faced stronger intervention. She also revealed his case wasn't escalated despite 3 referrals to the Prevent Counter-Terrorism scheme. Ruder-Cabana has pleaded guilty to murdering 3 girls at a dance class last July, as well as charges of attempted murder, production of the biochemical ricin and possession of a terrorist material. Earlier, Sir Keir Starmer warned of new and growing terror threats, with lone young men, he says, now responsible for carrying out extreme acts of violence.
Terrorism has changed. In the past, the predominant threat was highly organised groups with clear political intent, groups like Al-Qaeda. That threat, of course, remains. But now, alongside that, we also see acts of extreme violence perpetrated by loners, misfits, young men in their bedroom, accessing all manner of material online, desperate for notoriety.
In the US, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have officially taken office as president and vice president with an extravagant inauguration in Washington last night that lasted into the early hours.
And you're witnessing the dawn of the golden age of America. That's what it's going to be. We're bringing it back. We're going to bring it back fast.
Well, wasting no time, Trump signed orders to pull the US out of the World Health Organization and declared a national emergency at the border with Mexico. He also pardoned nearly 1,600 people tied to the January 6th Capitol riots, with some expected to walk free later today. And in his speech, Trump promised to be a peacemaker and a unifier, declaring the golden age for America begins right now. The spotlight had also previously turned to Elon Musk, who came under fire after appearing to make a Nazi salute at a post-inauguration event. Well, breaking news this hour from our Home and Security editor, Mark White, who has confirmed now that more than 1,000 small boat migrants have crossed the Channel illegally since the start of the year. That milestone was reached a week earlier than last year, with 2 boats carrying 120 people arriving in UK waters this morning alone. Despite the unpredictable winter weather, people smuggling gangs remain determined to push on with their trade, with thousands more migrants still waiting to cross in France. Comes after last year, over 36,800 small boat migrants arrived in the UK, and 2025 has already seen tragic losses, including the death of a migrant. The government has vowed, though, to dismantle smuggling networks, while the opposition have rejected previous deterrent schemes like Rwanda. And a devastating fire has torn through a hotel in the Turkish ski resort of Bolu, killing 66 people and injuring at least 51 others. The blaze erupted in the early hours of this morning at the Grand Kartal Hotel, which was packed with guests during the busy holiday season. 2 people are said to have tragically jumped from windows in a desperate attempt to escape the flames. Emergency teams have been working non-stop with more than 260 personnel on site, but rescue efforts continue. The cause of the fire, though, remains unclear, and authorities are investigating the circumstances surrounding the incident. Back here, wage growth in the UK has surged to 5.6%. That is the fastest pace in months, but unemployment is creeping up, now at 4.4%. December saw 47,000 fewer people on payrolls, marking the biggest drop since 2020. And businesses are also cutting costs ahead of looming tax hikes. Economists warn the jobs market, though, could cool further, with pay growth expected to slow and unemployment likely to rise. The figures also pile pressure on the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, while growing speculation points to a possible Bank of England rate cut next month. And just before I hand you back to Tom and Emily, an update on Prince Harry's legal battle with the publishers of The Sun. It's been delayed for a second time at the High Court today. The Duke of Sussex and Labour's Lord Tom Watson are suing News Group newspapers over allegations of unlawful information gathering, which the publisher denies. They say that the case, though, has followed 39 settlements over the past 18 years. The trial, initially set to begin this morning, was postponed until about 8 minutes ago after both sides requested more time. It's expected to last 8 weeks. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with you in half an hour. Now, though, it's over to Tom and Emily.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 9 minutes past 2. Now, the Prime Minister has said the Southport killings must be a line in the sand for Britain, and there must be fundamental change in how the country protects its children.
Yes, this was Keir Starmer addressing the nation this morning. He said the UK faces a new terrorism threat following the guilty plea of Axel Rudakabana.
Well, just moments ago, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, addressed the House of Commons, saying action taken against Axel Rudakabana was far too weak, adding that the Southport attack was one of the most barbaric crimes, as she announced more details of this public inquiry into his case.
OK, well, let's cross to our political editor, Christopher Hope. Christopher, it was a very interesting exchange in the House of Commons just now. Chris Philp putting a number of questions, quite difficult questions, to the Home Secretary.
Yeah, that's right. The question here is why the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister were so loath not to talk about the history that they knew immediately about Radicalization, why they weren't making clear what they knew. We heard from Sir Keir Starmer earlier in that briefing, that press conference in Downing Street when he spoke to the nation. He said there that he was updated as soon as new information emerged. So he would have known about the Al-Qaeda manual, he would have known about the ricin, but we only found that out for the wider public in October when charges were pressed. And that's why I think so many the information vacuum we saw last July and August led to this concern on the streets. Now, earlier today in that press conference with the Prime Minister, I asked him if he regretted calling people who had protested about the killings and about more wider immigration issues, if he regretted calling those who were concerned far right. And here's what he had to say.
Responsibility for the violence lies with them that perpetrated it. I was in Southport the day after these terrible murders. I was acknowledging and thanking the frontline police officers and ambulance who had been at the scene. You can imagine what they had been through. They were back at work the next day. They were saying it was just their job. I could see in their eyes the impact it had had on them, what they had to deal with, what they had to see, how they endured that. As I arrived back in London, those same officers were putting their riot gear on and having bricks thrown at them. Those same officers. I don't think anybody can justify that, nor should they attempt to do so.
That's the PM there pointing directly at me answering that question, talking about rioting, but not about protesters. And that's the concern, I think, of many people watching and listening to GB News. They have concerns about immigration, about lawless streets, but to be called or suggested they've been called far right misses the point, or they wouldn't use that term then. And these points picked up by Chris Philp, who's the shadow Home Secretary in the Commons just now. He asked Yvette Cooper whether she should and could be more openness and more transparency without prejudicing the trial. Ms Cooper said that she referred back to the Contempt of Court Act 1981, that social media users are not bound by the same rules that govern the police, media and government. And I think that's where you have this difference between what's being said on social media and what us as responsible journalists and other people can talk about. And that may be why the Law Commission are looking again at areas of contempt of court, because in that information vacuum, I think, into that can fuel misinformation, which can lead to difficulties, I think.
Chris Hope, thank you very much, live from Westminster for that overview. I should say joining us in the studio is our Home and Security Editor, Mark Waite, as well as the former Attorney General, Michael Ellis. Mark, we're going to start with you. It was a pretty feisty back and forth in the House of Commons, but the Home Secretary was making something very clear, that she was saying nothing could be said because it would have collapsed the trial. Do you buy it?
I don't buy it, to be honest. I find that a bit of a difficult argument to swallow because, having covered many criminal trials over the years, right at the very start of proceedings, the judge is very clear, telling the jury, giving them directions that they should judge the case on the evidence they hear before them in that particular trial, to forget about anything they may have heard before this trial in the run-up to those criminal proceedings. And there is information that could be put out into the public domain, especially if it's information that will be germane to the case when it's put before the jury, that the prosecution will rely on this information. And it's inconceivable to think that the prosecution, in putting the case against Axel Rudikabana, if it had gone to a full trial, would not have relied on that bad character evidence, the evidence of his referrals to Prevent and other agencies because of the violent outbursts at school, his perceived desire to carry out a school massacre. That would have formed part of that case. So actually, you know, some of that information beforehand might have been able to go out, even just along the lines of acknowledging that, yes, he was known to the authorities, of acknowledging some of the evidence that was uncovered very early on. Within a day or two, ricin was discovered at his home address. Also, that PDF document that linked to Al-Qaeda was discovered, and they realised within a day or so that that was the deadly toxin ricin, and it was a PDF linking to Al-Qaeda. Yet we waited for 3 long months before we eventually got this arranged briefing in Merseyside in Liverpool, of which I was at, to announce 2 new charges that no one was aware of before, that they had clearly been aware of. They had the information much, much earlier on in this investigation, and I have not as yet heard a satisfactory explanation from the government as to why there was that very long time lag from uncovering that evidence to the charges being laid against him and being made public.
I mean, do you suspect it was a case of Keir Starmer and the government being overcautious, or the idea that the British public can't handle the truth?
Well, it may be that, given the volatility that we were seeing at the time, that a decision was taken, and I don't know, because unless they actually answer this themselves, we won't really know. But it may be that they felt that that information in the public domain at that time may have worsened the situation. But the difficulty with that argument is actually it was a vacuum that was created by a lack of information that fueled these rumours on social media, that got many people who were rightly outraged at what had happened in Southport even more angry and feeling that information was not being fully disclosed, and it turns out that is indeed what happens. The Prime Minister and the Home Secretary have admitted that's what happened. They said because they wanted to ensure a fair trial, not the collapse of any forthcoming trial. But, you know, that vacuum was filled by the rumour, by the anger, by the disorder.
Michael Ellis.
Well, there was a dangerous vacuum here, as Mark's alluded to, and I don't buy it either, quite frankly. I don't buy the government's position at this stage. I just don't think it's enough. They have said that they're going to have an inquiry and that there should be no stone unturned, and I think part of that inquiry now should actually include what was said after arrest. They seem to be implying that the inquiry should leave no stone unturned, and there's all these comments about how it'll dive into all the detail. But what about what happened afterwards? Because there is great concern here that the vacuum that was created actually amounted to disinformation. And that is actually very damaging to the interests of justice. What is relevant here is, and what Yvette Cooper has reiterated in the Commons, is the Contempt of Court Act. It's a 1981 act. But as Mark will know from his years of covering criminal stories, it's actually, there is a threshold to reach before you are in danger of disturbing a trial. And of course, it's very important that we don't disturb trials, because one of the things that the Prime Minister has said, which is right, is that obviously if you do disturb the fairness of a criminal trial, you can jeopardise the interests of justice. But the Act says that there has to be substantial risk that the course of justice will be seriously impeded or prejudiced. Substantial risk of serious prejudice. And what has happened here to come close to justifying that terminology? So I think there's questions to be asked and answered here. I'm also concerned, as has been alluded to, about what they knew about this Al-Qaeda document, which apparently was some sort of academic study of Al-Qaeda tactics. Al-Qaeda, of course, is a proscribed terrorist organisation in the UK and the US and many other places. And what we've heard about ricin. Did the authorities know more, and could they have said more without creating a substantial risk of serious prejudice?
So could it be said that it's rather convenient that the government is taking this maximalist reading of the 1981 Act, because clearly, I mean, you used to make these decisions on behalf of the government, or at least advise them. Yeah. Clearly, there is a reading of that Act where things could have been said and the public could have had much greater insight into what was actually going on.
Yeah, on more than one occasion, Tom, I actually issued warnings to the press about the Contempt of Court Act in advance to sort of say, well, be careful what you report in these cases, or in this particular case, because we could see that there was a risk of trouble. But here, I think, this dangerous vacuum, and I don't think anyone could doubt that the vacuum of information actually became quite dangerous in this particular case. And therefore, you've got to always make a balancing act between the information that you give and the information that you withhold. The top priority, of course, is not to disrupt or damage or negate a criminal trial. You don't want that. Nobody wants that to happen. But there are things that you can do to prevent misinformation from occurring. And I think, you know, we never tell the public. We don't want the public to know if a person has previous convictions. That's clearly prejudicial. A jury could make an assumption, an improper assumption, that just because somebody has been in trouble before, they've burgled a house or they've shoplifted, you know, an item, that they must be guilty of the current charge. So we don't do that. But there's a balance to be drawn, and I think it would be helpful if this inquiry actually starts to look into as well what actually was said afterwards. That's going to be a key.
I mean, Keir Starmer did tell us, essentially, that if we'd known any of this, then Axel Riddle-Cabana would not receive justice. Essentially, he'd be a free man. You know, the court proceedings wouldn't have gone, and he could just be, you know, nothing would have happened. He would never be locked up or any consequences.
Well, certainly that is
threat, isn't it?
that is the sort of the view of the CPS, at least the Crown Prosecution Service, at least the public stance that the Crown Prosecution Service are putting out with regard to why certain pieces of information were not in the public domain. But I have to say, in speaking to members of the police service across the country, as I do and have done for many years, there's increasing concern within the policing family that the Crown Prosecution Service seems to be more and more risk averse in terms of the information that could be put out there. That the police service in general would like to be far more proactive in some of the information that they put out in ongoing investigations, either before charge or even after charge, knowing that the chance of prejudicing any trial many months down the road is very minimal indeed. However, the Crown Prosecution Service, clearly in advising the police, are saying no, we need to be cautious, and the police are taking that expert advice from lawyers.
And we know how much Keir Starmer feels for the CPS.
As the former DPP.
As the former DPP,
Look, I know
it is him.
really pressed for time, but I do want to ask just this final question of Michael Ellis, because, of course, you were in government when some of the cases that Yvette Cooper referenced in the Commons today, the murder of Sir David Amos, the asylum seeker who killed a pensioner up in Hartlepool as well. Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, was saying that information about the perpetrators of both of those terrorist atrocities were withheld too. Does that hold water?
Well, look, without going into the detail about individual cases, of course it's right in many cases to protect the sanctity of justice and to ensure that justice is obtained for a person who is charged with an offence. We don't want to prejudice juries, but I think in this case, in this particular case, there has been a serious amount of damage done by the decisions that was made. And there was a vacuum that actually, the vacuum in itself, the vacuum of information in itself caused harm. That's why this inquiry needs to look at whether that was appropriate and whether the right decisions were made throughout. If they've got nothing to hide, they'll let the inquiry, Anderson, I think, is doing this inquiry, and he's got a lot of experience in terrorist actions. He can then establish, not only up to the point of the incident, but past that incident, what happened. Was it right for this information to be withheld in the way that it was?
Can I just follow up just very briefly on what Michael said there to hammer home this point? I think this whole issue, this episode, has been deeply damaging for public trust in authorities, in the government going forward. They will look in, God forbid, the circumstances of another attack, something similar in future, at that and not trust the information they are receiving from the state.
White, Michael Ellis, thank you so much for being
trust in the
with
public
us.
inquiry as well. Thank you very much, Mark White and Michael Ellis. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up on today's show. We are, of course, going to be turning our attention to America. Once again, the golden age has begun as Trump signs off a raft of executive orders. Stick with us.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Figures released by the National Child Measurement Programme in 2024 found that almost 1 in 10 children was obese in the first year of school. Children living in deprived areas are twice as likely to be overweight as those in more affluent parts. Organisations like the Prepped Foundation are educating youngsters about healthy eating by giving them the skills to create balanced meals. TV chef James Golding has joined the foundation as the head of food education, and he joins me now to talk about the work. James, lovely to see you here.
Good to see you too. So Prepped used to be Table Talk Foundation, and it's now obviously Prep for Life, Prep for Knowledge. It's basically a charity to encourage kids to have a better understanding of food, but at the same time enjoy cooking and hopefully make better food choices in their life, as well as perhaps, you know, share the information we give them with their families.
Do you see them developing an understanding of the difference between a healthy and unhealthy food?
Yes, I think that, you know, kids tend to sort of be taught a lot of this in school, but being able to actually ask questions to a chef and be able to cook with produce which they know is one, that is going to be tasty because they've tasted it, but two, open their eyes to food that they may not have tried before. I think that, you know, I think a lot of kids say they don't want to try stuff because they don't like the way it looks, but the way that we produce our sessions, you know, we encourage the kids to try, and I think it really does open their eyes. It's very easy, I think, currently to be able to make easier choices, say fast food choices or you know, that type of thing, and it's obviously giving people the ability to make the right choices, but also the skills to be able to do it. So I think it's something that needs to be addressed and something that really needs to be pushed, and that's what we're doing as a charity.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
It's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 28 minutes past 2, and in case you hadn't noticed, the United States has got a new president. Should we discuss it with the Republican strategist Matthew Hurt? Matthew, it's been a flurry of activity in Washington. Keep us up to date.
You know, it's great to be with you. There is so much excitement in Washington, D.C. for President Trump, the incoming administration, and the wrath of executive orders to put America back on track. Donald Trump called this a revolution of common sense yesterday, and I think that's exactly what we're seeing in the United States.
And what does this mean for Britain? That's what we care about. We're looking to America, a president who is totally different from our Prime Minister. I mean, I don't think they agree on anything. Completely different world outlook. But will President Trump be nice to us?
Well, I think Britain is an important strategic partner, long partner of the United States, and we foresee a continuation of that relationship. But just like Justin Trudeau in Canada, I think President Trump will be able to put a little more pressure on our friends in Parliament there, and particularly your Labour government, to make conscious decisions to do the right thing in the global marketplace and with our partnership and with the people of Great Britain.
It is, of course, interesting to see how much quicker things are going in this iteration of a Trump presidency than in 2017, when cabinet appointments took many, many months to be finalised. Perhaps it was a team that was less ready, less prepared for government than we're seeing this time round. I'm hearing that Marco Rubio has just been sworn in as Secretary of State. We're expecting more cabinet appointments to be passed a lot faster this time round than last time.
President Trump announced last week that more than 1,000 people had been already appointed and hired and moving through the process. This is 2 or 3 times more than the number of people in 2017 at the same time. The Trump administration and his staff have learned the lesson of the first time around, and they are moving at a much quicker pace, which is great for the people who elected him, the millions upon millions of Americans who want common sense to return to the United States.
And Matthew, I'm looking at this list of executive orders. I mean, very wide-reaching, not all of them surprising. But will he face any hiccups in terms of implementing them? Could there be any pushback?
On most of the executive orders, there is 70 or 80 or even 90% agreement among the American people. On diversity, equity, inclusion, most Americans believe that you should be hired on your skills and your merits. On immigration, most Americans believe that we should secure the border. On crime, most Americans believe that we deserve safe streets and safe communities. And so on most of these issues, a majority of the American people are in agreement. And I think we will see this is the apex of Donald Trump's political career, and I think that we're going to see a wide range of Americans in support of most of these actions.
Apex is such an interesting word to use because, of course, I think this is probably the week when Donald Trump has more power than he's ever had before, and possibly than he will ever have again. We do know that there is a slim majority in the House of Representatives. It only takes 3 or 4 Republicans to vote against the agenda for a bill to now collapse, particularly because of all of the cabinet appointments that have removed some Republicans from Congress, at least for the moment until there are special elections. There could be a moment where things get a bit hairy. I mean, the midterms will be a struggle, and of course, DOGE, the new Department of Government Efficiency, will be reporting, I think, within 12 months, proposing sweeping cuts. How likely is it that the cuts agenda actually passes Congress?
Well, that is the question. The deep state and even many Republicans in Congress are beholden to the establishment of the status quo. I think it's going to take real political courage, but But I think people outside of Washington, D.C., in what they call the flyover states, are really supportive of these policies, moving some federal departments to other states outside of Washington, D.C., and in fact, asking employees who are working remotely maybe to not even return to federal service. It is important that Washington and that Donald Trump and his administration advance these, and particularly through the lens of DOGE, I think we're going to see some private sector innovation that we haven't seen in government ever, and that provides a tremendous opportunity.
I think we could do with a little bit of that, a little bit of a business-minded government, a little bit of a flare. Matthew Hurt, thank you very much indeed, Republican strategist. I'll let you continue with the celebrations.
I think some sore heads in Washington, D.C. this morning,
so,
although not Donald Trump.
Didn't he get to like 3? Oh, Diet Coke.
Diet Coke is his order of the drink. But this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Plenty more to come. Indeed, a shocking exclusive on grooming gangs with our national reporter Charlie Peters. It's not one to miss. That after your headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just after 2:30. The top story this hour. The Home Secretary has called Axel Rudicabarner's Southport attack one of the most barbaric crimes. That's as she has announced a public inquiry into his case. Vet Cooper said the 18-year-old who admitted carrying a knife over 10 times before his deadly rampage should have faced stronger intervention. She also revealed his case wasn't escalated despite 3 referrals to the Prevent Counter-Terrorism scheme. The 18-year-old has pleaded guilty to murdering 3 girls at a dance class, as well as charges of attempted murder, ricin production and possession of terrorist material. Earlier, the Prime Minister also warned of new growing terror threats, saying lone young men are now responsible for carrying out extreme acts of violence. More than 1,000 small boat migrants have already crossed the Channel illegally since the start of this year, GB News can exclusively reveal. The milestone was reached a week earlier than last year, with 2 boats carrying 120 people arriving in UK waters this morning alone. Despite the unpredictable weather, people smuggling gangs remain determined to push on with their trade, with thousands more migrants waiting to cross in France. It comes after last year over 36,800 people arrived in the UK via small boats. The government, though, has vowed to dismantle smuggling networks, despite previously rejecting the Tories' deterrence schemes like Rwanda. Well, an update on the situation in Turkey now, where a devastating fire has torn through a hotel in the ski resort of Bolu, killing 66 people and injuring at least 50 others. The blaze erupted in the early hours of this morning at the Grand Kartal Hotel, which was packed with guests during the busy holiday season. 2 people are said to have tragically jumped from windows in a desperate attempt to escape the flames. Emergency teams have been working non-stop with more than 260 personnel on site, but rescue efforts continue. The cause of the fire, though, remains unclear, and authorities say they're investigating the circumstances surrounding the tragedy. And an update from the High Court. Well, Prince Harry's battle with the publisher of The Sun is finally underway after 2 delays this morning. Lawyers this afternoon failed to convince the judge to allow for more time for negotiations, with barristers blaming the time difference, saying Prince Harry, 8 hours behind in California, hadn't had a chance to consider any settlement. The judge, though, rejected the argument, giving both sides just 10 minutes to regroup before proceedings began. The Duke of Sussex and Labour's former deputy leader, Lord Watson, are suing News Group newspapers over alleged unlawful information gathering, including voicemail interception, claims that NGN denies. Well, that's it from me for this afternoon. Sophia Wensler will be here with a full roundup of all today's stories at 3 o'clock, and Tom and Emily will be back with you after this break.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Rather cloudy once again for many of us, with rain in places but not everywhere. It will be brightest in the north, albeit with a mix of sunny spells and showers for Scotland and Northern Ireland, with low pressure to the northwest. This low to the southwest will produce an awful lot of cloud across England and Wales, and a slow-moving front which has effectively stalled through North Wales and Northern England. That continues to bring outbreaks of light rain and drizzle. In the south, there will be a few cloud breaks, but on the whole, it's a cloudy day and temperatures will reach 5 to 7 Celsius. Further north, with any brighter spells, 8 Celsius possible. Quite a few showers coming into the west of Scotland. Now into Tuesday afternoon, we're going to see further showers arriving into northern and western Scotland, but the best of any sunshine and clear spells as we go into the evening will be across eastern and southern Scotland, as well as parts of Northern Ireland. Into northern England, and we've got a lot of cloud and outbreaks of rain. Likewise for north and west Wales, 1 or 2 showers for Devon and Cornwall. And a lot of cloud there for southern areas. Low cloud, some mist patches forming overnight in places as well. And we'll see the odd fog patch for Scotland and Northern Ireland, where we do have lengthy clear spells. As the night goes on, the rain across northern England and Wales sinks into the Midlands. We'll also see some rain breaking out for southern counties of England. 3 or 4 Celsius in the south, a touch of frost further north where we've got any prolonged clear spells and a few fog patches first thing. Now, Wednesday morning starts off dreary across the Midlands, the south and southeast of England. The cloud and rain slowly peters out and moves southeastwards. Brighter skies follow for the north and west, albeit with a few showers. Highs of 5 to 7 Celsius.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Russell Holding. In the West Midlands, Watery Lane Middleway in Birmingham is partly blocked northbound where a lorry's overturned at Garrison Circus. There are queues from Camp Hill Circus and delays on other nearby roads as you divert. In Suffolk, the A12 is closed in both directions over the Gull Wing Bridge in Lowestoft because of a technical problem. Delays as you divert over the Bascule Bridge. In London, the Strand Underpass has been closed because of a technical problem. The queues back over Waterloo Bridge from the IMAX roundabout. Gatwick Express train services are suspended after a signalling problem. On the M25 in Kent, it's down to 2 out of 4 lanes anti-clockwise, but the right-hand Dartford tunnel is closed because of an accident. The queues back to junction 1B at Dartford, and there are delays of up to 2 3/4 hours to Irish ferry sailings between Dover and Calais because of poor weather conditions. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is now 20 to 3, and GB News can reveal that a grooming gang abuser is involved in attempting to convert a property into a children's care home in Leeds.
And we now know that after this investigation by GB News, this planning application has been withdrawn.
Yes, Abid Yunus, who was jailed for 2.5 years in 2015 after being convicted of sexual activity with a child, is the owner of a property that he wants to convert into a care home for children.
There's so much shocking in this story, but GB News national reporter Charlie Peters, who uncovered this, is here in the studio. A very short sentence to begin with, and now we find out that he was involved in a planning application to turn a property into a children's care home.
That's
a
right.
Sex offender.
Abid Yunus, he was jailed in 2015 for being part of a 10-strong grooming, rape and abuse gang that targeted a 12-year-old girl in West Yorkshire. Now, Yunus was only jailed for 2.5 years for being convicted of sexual activity with a child, but some members of that gang were jailed for longer sentences, up to about 15 years. I know that at least one of the members of that gang was born in Pakistan, but I don't think anyone's been deported in association with those really horrendous crimes. Now, since being released from prison, we do know that Abid Yunus bought this property in about 2019, and it's quite significant. It's got more than 5 bedrooms. There was an application to turn it into an HMO, a multi-occupancy location, which I understand, they wanted to turn it into an Airbnb letting. That was blocked due to residents raising concerns about parking. But he's tried again for another conversion. There's been an application to turn this dwelling into a care home for children, backed by planning agent called Faz Chowdhury, and then also Casa Care Services, the care home company behind this attempted transformation of the property, led by an Omar Farouk. Now, as I understand it, they were aware of Mr. Abid Yunus's criminal background well into last year, but the planning application has only recently been withdrawn since we raised concerns directly with local politicians, local councillors, and when we hand-delivered our right of reply and our notice that we intended to publish this story to those involved in the planning application.
I mean, this is an extraordinary story, not just because of what is attempting to be done here, a convicted sex offender wanting to open a care home for children, but the number of people involved in this, as you just listed off a ream of names there, all of whom will have likely known about this man's background, this man's conviction, and yet still be wanting to do business with him. Like, this raises some questions about how communities are responding to these sorts of convictions.
So this building actually had an open day in late December when anyone could come along as part of the planning process to see what was being proposed in the local community. Now, I'm told by a source from the area, and it's just been backed up by another source nearby, that concerns were raised at that open day in the property with those proposing to transform it into a children's care home about Abed Yunus. They were told directly, and I'm told that they feigned surprise and shock at this instance, but nothing was done about it until, of course, as you know, we raised concerns directly. So it appears to me, based on the evidence that I've heard and seen and all the testimony I've taken about this case over a week of investigating, that they did not act when they learnt about the case, and there is good reason to believe that they may have known before they were informed directly. Abed Yunus is hardly a quiet character. His name is all over the internet. If you search about his conviction, there was local press coverage of that conviction in 2015. So heinous were the crimes, so large was this abuse gang, this rape and grooming gang, that it was obviously going to be well known. So lots of really difficult questions here for that Leeds community about how these people bandied together to push forward this business proposal, which would have made a lot of money. There's a lot of demand for care homes at the moment, particularly for children, especially with the influx of small boat migrants, the amount of demand that's putting on care homes. So it would have made a lot of cash. But is it possible that they just decided to look beyond this very troubling safeguarding aspect of having a child sex offender being involved in the process? Or did they just think, oh, it doesn't matter either way, we just want to make the money?
And the original crime, so this was a gang of 10 men, all of Pakistani heritage. No one's been deported, even those who were born in Pakistan. And you say there might be one, you don't know there might be more. He was done for sexual activity with a child. Why was his sentence so short? Was it because there wasn't evidence of actual rape? Or well, I don't want to get too particular, but it seems awfully short.
Well, unfortunately, I suppose it's not. It's quite common, actually, that sort of sentence, because the sentencing guidelines are such that a judge, within their own preferences, can adjust the limits according to the circumstances of the abuse. I mean, I was at a sentencing in September where one person was found guilty of child sexual offences against an 11-year-old girl, was given a 5 or 6 year sentence. Somebody else also in the dock was given a 25-year sentence. So if someone is a particularly evil offender in this sort of abuse, they can get extensive sentences. But I think most people in the public, they look at this stuff and they think, well, actually, any sort of child sexual activity is extremely evil. To get 2.5 years is just totally insufficient.
Sorry, to go back to that sentencing you were at in September, someone got 25 years because perhaps they were...
they were ringleader, particularly aggressive.
But the other one, if they were caring in the way they raped a child, they only get 5 years out with good behaviour and 2.5.
Yeah, the difference between being convicted of child rape and child sexual abuse can have a very significant impact on the sentencing, and that split has caused quite a lot of these scenarios. For example, in the 10-strong gang that Abed Yunus was a part of, one man was sentenced to 15 years for being part of the same process with the same poor victim, that 12-year-old girl. And I know people are getting a bit upset about how we keep using the term grooming gang, but a lot of survivors actually have told me over the years that grooming is an important term to use because that's the very particular and specific method of exploitation that's taking place here. These children, most of them girls, don't realise they're being abused because they are groomed. They're groomed into the boyfriend model of exploitation.
Given alcohol.
And it often starts with other gifts, such as sweets and just attention. A lot of these young children just have been ignored their whole lives, and suddenly they get attention and appreciation, particularly if they've been in care or if they come from troubled backgrounds. It can present that sort of method of exploitation. That's why grooming is an explicit term.
I mean, what 10 men were doing with a 12-year-old girl sexually assault. just disgusting.
And to think that one of them could be involved in opening a care home as well.
Yeah, it's crazy. Charlie Peters, thank you very much indeed. We are going to a bit of a gear change here. You know, some of you may be looking for a bit of winter sun.
And away from it all,
And
really.
away from it all, yeah. Here's the forecast for some holiday destinations in Europe.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Some winter sunshine likely for the next couple of days in Sardinia and also Sicily, but some showers in Cyprus and some pretty wet conditions across the Canaries and Madeira for the next couple of days. The same weather system bringing soggy skies to Portugal also, and some wet weather across southern parts of France, some snow over the Alps. Showers in Cyprus, they'll still be there on Thursday, but they should be easing by Friday, and the rain in the Canaries will be easing by Friday as well, and temperatures over 20 degrees here.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Now, we're going to introduce you to Liam Wildish. Liam, well, I'd like to think he's a friend of mine because I follow him on Instagram, on TikTok there as well.
You're a big fan, aren't you?
Big fan, because there's what he does. He's a cleaner. He cleans signs. But the thing is, he's not employed by councils or whatever. He does this voluntarily. And you sort of think to yourself, well, who cleans these signs? Why have these signs been allowed to get into this terrible state of disrepair and filthiness?
So basically, long story short, about 6 years ago, I used to be a window cleaner. In the community where I lived, I noticed all of the road signs were filthy, and I was perfectly equipped to clean them. So basically, I cleaned the road signs as a bit of a thank you to the community and sort of make a little bit of awareness in my window cleaning business at the time. Yeah. Sort of cleans up the area, makes the road safer, and that's kind of how that started. And people found it like a really satisfying sort of approach. So that sort of led on to today of a video in cleaning the dirty road signs and making sort of satisfying content with it as well.
What is the equipment? What have we got here?
So this is a water-fed pole system connected to a backpack, which is what feeds the water through the end of the brush there. It's perfectly equipped to basically remove this green dirty, it's like a mildew build-up that you get on the signs. Yeah. As you can see, this is like extremely effective at removing so.
So GB News viewers, if they spot a particularly grisly sign in their area, then they can get in touch.
They can do, yeah.
And Liam Wildish, the sign guy, can sort you out.
if you find Liam the sign guy online, drop me a message, let me know, and I'll add you to my list of places.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, welcome back. It's 2:51 and a weather bomb is forecast to hit parts of the UK later this week. Brace yourselves, bringing strong winds, heavy rain and some snow.
Well, the Met Office has issued warnings that gusts of up to 80 miles an hour could cause power cuts, travel disruption, damage to buildings, as well as a danger to life from flying debris.
Well, joining us now is meteorologist John Ketley to tell us more. A weather bomb coming our way.
Yeah, that's pressure falling 25 millibars over 24 hours. That's roughly what it means when you've got a weather bomb. At the moment, it's not even developed. It's way across the other side of the Atlantic where things are going to start happening in the next 12 to 18 hours. And then it's going to develop very intensely around about the Azores on Thursday. and then swing up towards the UK for Friday. So it is going to be a very nasty affair. It's quite a brutal system that is likely to develop, and it will bring these very strong winds across the whole of the UK. That's to say, we are seeing gusts up to 50 miles an hour, certainly. Depends on the track of it, really. It depends exactly where it crosses northern Britain, but that's where it probably will go up across Scotland. It does mean that the more intense winds at the moment were probably going to be through the central belt of Scotland. So not such a good place to be during Friday and into early Saturday. I think that's where there could be some really damaging squally winds gusting up to 80 miles an hour in that particular part of the world at the end of this week. There'll be plenty of rain as well. It's moving very quickly though, so the rain, although it'll be heavy and squally, shouldn't last all that long, just a few hours before it moves away again. But as you mentioned, there could be snow as well. So I've got a bit of everything, really, a real cocktail.
So, really, where is going to be worst hit across the UK? This is coming in, presumably, from the west.
Yes, it's coming in from the west, Tom. Yes, I mean, you know perfectly well. We all know how cold it's been in the US in the past few days. And that really cold air has now got into Boca Chica down in Texas. So it's about 2 degrees there at SpaceX, for example.
Yeah,
so that's how
rockets.
cold this air is. And the very fierce cold weather across much of North America now and coming into the Davis Strait between Greenland and Canada is intensifying the jet stream. And that's why this is going to be a very intense storm as it sweeps in towards us very quickly as we go through the next 2 or 3 days. So, yeah, there will be snow because it is going to be pretty cold air. And that snow is more likely at the moment across the mountains of northern Scotland, but the backwash of it, probably during Saturday, could well bring some snow into Northern Ireland, parts of Northern England as well. So, as I
It's
say,
going to be an
a proper winter
absolutely
storm.
awful weekend. It's going to be absolutely awful.
Unless you love a bit of snow,
Heavy
but-
rain, gusty winds, huge amounts of snow.
Yeah.
John, thank you.
Well, John Catley, thank you so much for bringing us all of that, and thank you for inserting a SpaceX reference into a weather forecast. Fantastic stuff, love it. Well, you've been watching Good Afternoon Britain, and do not go anywhere. Of course, the one and only Martin Daubney, he's up next.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Rather cloudy once again for many of us, with rain in places but not everywhere. It will be bright.